When Kang Min-jae kissed Juliette Vale on that frozen terrace overlooking Seoul, he destroyed three empires in under 60 seconds. His family's dynasty, her carefully constructed career, and the arranged marriage that had been sealed before either of them could breathe. The tattooed CEO, who terrified boardrooms across Asia, had just confessed obsession to a woman who wasn't supposed to exist in his world. And now his ex-fiancée stood 10 feet away in white silk, watching their ruin unfold in real time. If you want to know how a single kiss can detonate billion-dollar legacies and turn two brilliant professionals into fugitives from their own lives, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happened next in Seoul didn't just break rules, it rewrote them in blood and diamonds. The Hanuel Foundation Gala didn't feel like a party. It felt like a hunting ground dressed in champagne and designer gowns. Juliette Vale stood near the bar nursing her second glass of Prosecco, scanning the ballroom with the practiced eye of someone who had learned to read power dynamics the way most people read weather patterns. 8 months in Seoul had taught her that much. The crystal chandeliers overhead cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The conversation humming through the crowd moved in 3 languages: Korean, English, Mandarin, shifting seamlessly depending on who held leverage in each exchange. She wore midnight blue silk that clung to her curves without apology. Her natural hair pulled back in a sleek low bun that had taken her 40 minutes to perfect that afternoon. In rooms like this, presentation wasn't vanity, it was armor. She'd learned that the hard way during her first month in Korea when a senior executive had dismissed her pitch entirely because she'd worn her hair in braids. Too casual, his assistant had explained later with apologetic eyes. He couldn't take you seriously. Juliette had wanted to throw her laptop through his office window. Instead, she'd adapted, survived. Won contracts that made those same executives beg for her time 6 months later. Tonight she was here representing her consulting firm at one of Seoul's most elite charity events, surrounded by old money, new tech billionaires, and enough political influence to shift national policy over dessert. She hated these things, the performance of it all. The way men looked at her body first and her credentials second. The way women smiled with their mouths but calculated with their eyes, measuring whether she was competition or irrelevant. But she was good at it now. Good at smiling at the right moments. Good at deflecting the invasive questions about where she was really from with just enough charm to avoid giving offense. Good at pretending the loneliness didn't carve through her chest every time she returned to her empty apartment at night. You look like you're planning an escape route. The voice came from behind her, low, amused, unmistakably male. Juliette turned and found herself looking at a man in his early 30s, wearing gold-rimmed glasses and an expression of genuine warmth that felt rare in this room. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, only to someone doing the same thing. He extended his hand. "Park Jin-woo. I run a startup that's probably going bankrupt in 6 months, but tonight I'm pretending to be optimistic about our Series B funding." Juliette laughed despite herself. Juliette Vale, international consultant who's pretending she enjoys these events. Ah, brutal honesty. I like you already. Jin-woo grabbed 2 fresh glasses of champagne from a passing server and handed her one. So what brings an international consultant to Seoul's most tedious annual competition for who can donate the most money while looking the most humble about it? "Client obligations," Juliette said. "You?" "Same. Investor wants me to network." He made air quotes with his free hand, which apparently means standing around making small talk while everyone calculates your net worth based on your watch. "What does your watch say?" Jin-woo glanced at his wrist. "That I shop at department stores and have no idea what I'm doing." Juliette grinned. For the first time all evening, the tightness in her shoulders eased slightly. Jin-woo seemed harmless, funny, self-deprecating, the kind of person who didn't take himself too seriously in a room full of people who took themselves far too seriously. They talked for 20 minutes. He told her about his company's struggles with investor expectations. She shared carefully edited stories about the chaos of consulting work in a culture where she'd never quite be an insider. He made her laugh twice. She almost forgot she was performing. And then the air in the ballroom changed. Juliette felt it before she saw anything. A shift in energy, conversations pausing mid-sentence, heads turning toward the entrance. The kind of attention that happened when someone truly important entered a room. She followed the gazes and her breath caught. Kang Min-jae stood just inside the ballroom entrance in a black suit tailored so perfectly it looked like violence wrapped in silk. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features that made him look like he'd been carved from stone by someone who understood brutality. But it was the tattoos that made him impossible to ignore, dark ink that crawled up from beneath his collar, coiling around his throat like living serpents. In a room full of conservative businessmen in traditional elegance, he looked like something feral that had learned to wear human clothes. Juliette had seen him exactly 3 times in 6 months. The first time had been in a boardroom during her initial pitch to Daesung Entertainment Group. He'd sat at the head of the table in absolute silence for 45 minutes while she presented her strategic analysis, his dark eyes tracking every movement she made. She'd thought he hated her. Then at the end, he'd simply said, "Hire her," and walked out while his executives scrambled to follow. The second time had been 2 months later during a company-wide meeting. She'd been presenting quarterly projections when she'd looked up and found him watching her from the back of the room with an intensity that made her lose her train of thought mid-sentence. He'd left before she could finish. The third time had been 3 weeks ago in the hallway outside his executive office. She'd been leaving a meeting with his CFO when she'd nearly collided with him. For 5 seconds, they'd stood too close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her think of smoke and cedar. He'd looked at her like he was memorizing her face, then he'd stepped aside without a word and disappeared into his office. She hadn't seen him since. Until now. Min-jae moved through the ballroom like a predator navigating a herd, people unconsciously shifting out of his path. His expression revealed nothing, but Juliette noticed the way his jaw tightened when an older man tried to intercept him for conversation. Noticed the way his eyes swept the crowd with something that looked almost like boredom. Until those eyes found her. The impact was physical, like being seen through clothes, through skin, straight down to the parts of herself she kept locked away. Min-jae's gaze locked onto hers across 50 feet of polished marble and expensive perfume, and Juliette felt her pulse spike despite every professional instinct screaming at her to look away. She didn't look away. Neither did he. "Oh shit," Jinwoo muttered beside her. Juliette broke eye contact first, heat flooding her face. "What? Do you know who that is?" Kang Min-jae, CEO of Daesung Entertainment Group, one of my firm's clients. "One of your—" Jinwoo laughed, but it sounded nervous. "Jesus, no wonder you look terrified." "I'm not terrified. You just turned 3 shades darker and your hand is shaking." Juliette looked down. He was right. She set her champagne glass on the bar before she could drop it. "He's just intense, that's all." "Intense?" Jinwoo's voice dropped lower. "Juliette, that man is a fucking legend in Seoul. He took over Daesung from his father 5 years ago, when it was hemorrhaging money, and turned it into the most profitable entertainment conglomerate in Asia. He's ruthless, brilliant. People are terrified of him. I've worked with difficult executives before." "This isn't difficult. This is—" Jinwoo trailed off, then shook his head. "Look, I don't know what your professional relationship is like, but everyone in Seoul knows Kang Min-jae doesn't look at people the way he just looked at you unless he wants something. He was just— I've been in 3 meetings with him. Trust me, that wasn't a casual glance." Juliette's stomach tightened. She wanted to argue, to insist Jinwoo was reading too much into a simple moment of eye contact. But something cold and truthful in her gut told her he was right. She'd felt it too. The way Min-jae had looked at her hadn't been professional curiosity. It had been hunger. "I should probably circulate," she said, trying to sound casual. "Thanks for the conversation." "Wait." Jinwoo caught her arm gently. "I didn't mean to freak you out. I just meant, be careful, okay? Men like him don't operate by normal rules." Juliette forced a smile. "I can handle myself." She moved away from the bar, weaving through clusters of conversation toward the opposite side of the ballroom where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline. She needed air, needed space to think, needed to get away from the weight of Min-jae's attention before she did something stupid like look for him again. She found a quieter corner near the windows where the crowd thinned slightly. Outside, the city spread beneath her like a circuit board of light, neon signs in Korean and English, traffic flowing through streets like blood through veins, the dark ribbon of the Han River cutting through it all. Seoul had felt impossible when she'd first arrived. Too fast, too crowded, too foreign. But she'd learned its rhythms, learned how to navigate subway systems and business etiquette and the 1,000 unspoken rules that governed every interaction. Learned how to be lonely in a city of 10 million people. And she'd learned how to bury the part of herself that missed home, missed her mother's laugh and her best friend's chaos, and the way English sounded when it wasn't being filtered through translation apps and cultural differences. You disappeared quickly. Juliette's entire body went rigid. She turned slowly and found Kang Min-jae standing 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Up close, he was even more intimidating than she remembered. Taller, broader, with a presence that seemed to compress the air around him. The tattoos on his neck were even more detailed than she'd realized, dark scales and coiled muscle that looked alive in the chandelier light. Mr. Kang. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. Last-minute decision. His eyes never left hers. I don't usually attend these events. Why tonight? Something flickered across his expression, too fast to identify. I heard you would be here. The honesty of it struck her like a slap. No pretense, no professional excuse, just the truth delivered with the confidence of someone who didn't apologize for wanting things. Juliette's throat went dry. That's inappropriate. Yes. We have a professional relationship. Yes. Then you shouldn't have come here looking for me. Min-jae stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. Tell me to leave, he said quietly. Tell me you don't want me here and I'll walk away right now. Juliette opened her mouth. The words should have been simple, professional. A clear boundary between consultant and client, between appropriate and catastrophic. But nothing came out, because the truth was she'd been thinking about him for months, wondering what it meant when he watched her during meetings with that unsettling intensity, wondering if she'd imagined the way his voice softened slightly when he spoke to her directly, wondering if she was losing her mind, projecting attraction onto a client because she was lonely and exhausted and desperately touch-starved after 8 months of existing in a culture where she would always be an outsider. I can't tell you to leave, she finally said. You're a guest here. That's not what I asked. Min-jae. 6 months, he interrupted, his voice dropping even lower. 6 months I've watched you walk into my company like you own every room you enter. 6 months I've sat through meetings trying to focus on quarterly projections while all I could think about was whether you were as lonely in soul as you looked. 6 months of pretending I didn't notice the way you hold yourself like you're always braced for attack. Juliette's heart slammed against her ribs. You don't know anything about me. I know you take your coffee black with no sugar because sweet things make you feel guilty for enjoying them. I know you work until 3 in the morning, at least twice a week, because I've seen the exhaustion in your eyes during morning briefings. I know you laugh at Jin Woo's terrible jokes, but you never laugh like you mean it with anyone else. I know you're brilliant and terrifying and so fucking lonely, it makes me want to burn down everything between us just to reach you. The words hit her like physical blows, each one too accurate, too invasive, too impossible for him to know unless he'd been watching her far more carefully than any CEO should watch a consultant. This is insane, she whispered. Yes. We can't. I know. Then why are you telling me this? Min-jae's expression finally cracked, just slightly, just enough for her to see the frustration beneath the control. Because 6 months of pretending is destroying me. Because every time you walk out of my building, I spend the rest of the day wondering if you'll come back. Because I terminated my engagement 3 months ago, and the only person I could think about while I was doing it was you. The floor dropped out from under her. You were engaged? I was. What happened? I met you. Min-jae's voice was rough now, stripped of its usual cold authority. I met you, and everything else became impossible. Juliette couldn't breathe. The ballroom felt too hot, too crowded, the champagne in her stomach threatening to come back up. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. CEOs didn't confess obsession to consultants at charity galas. Men like Kang Min-jae didn't throw away engagements for women they barely knew. I need air, she managed. Then let me take you outside. No, I need to be alone. I need to think. Juliette, Min-jae caught her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop her from fleeing. His thumb pressed against her pulse point, and she knew he could feel how fast her heart was racing. I'm not asking you to give me an answer tonight. I'm not asking you to risk your career or your reputation. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you don't feel this too. She looked up at him and saw the truth written across his face. The hunger. The desperation. The same terrifying attraction she'd been fighting for months. I do feel it, she admitted, her voice barely audible. But that doesn't mean... The rest of her sentence died when Min-jae's expression shifted into something raw and unguarded. For just a second, the ruthless CEO disappeared entirely, and she saw the man underneath, the one who looked at her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Come outside with me, he said. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Juliette knew she should refuse, knew she should walk away, find Jinwoo, make some excuse about feeling ill, and leave the gala entirely. Knew she should put as much distance between herself and Kang Min-jae as physically possible before the situation detonated her entire life. Instead, she heard herself say, 5 minutes. The terrace was freezing. Seoul's winter hit like a blade the moment they stepped through the French doors, cold wind tangling through Juliette's hair and cutting through the thin silk of her dress. The city sprawled beneath them in all directions. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of people who had no idea that Juliette Vale's carefully constructed world was about to implode. Min-jae shrugged out of his suit jacket without a word and draped it over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, smelling like that same cologne that had haunted her since the hallway encounter 3 weeks ago. Better? He asked. No. Juliette wrapped the jacket tighter around herself anyway. I'm still freezing, and I'm still terrified, and you're still saying things that could ruin both our careers. Then tell me to stop. I already tried that. Try harder. Juliette turned to face him fully. In the darkness, with the city lights reflecting in his eyes, he looked less like a CEO and more like something dangerous dressed in human skin. What do you want from me, Min-jae? Really? Not the romantic confession version. The truth. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable again. Then he said, I want you to have dinner with me, somewhere private where we're not employer and consultant, where you can tell me the real reason you came to Seoul, and I can tell you why I spend half my day finding excuses to walk past your office. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. You're just afraid of what comes after dinner. He was right, and they both knew it. I can't date a client, Juliette said. It's unethical. It would destroy my professional reputation. People already look for reasons to dismiss me in this industry. Being a woman, being black, being American. If they find out I'm sleeping with a client, it's over. Everything I've built, gone. Then I'll terminate your contract. What? First thing Monday morning, I'll end Daesung's relationship with your firm entirely. Problem solved. Juliette stared at him. You're not serious. Completely serious. That's insane. You'd throw away a valuable business relationship just to take you to dinner without either of us pretending there aren't rules we're breaking? Yes, absolutely. Min-jae stepped closer, close enough that she could see her reflection in his eyes. I've spent 6 months being your client, Juliette. Being professional, being appropriate. And it's killing me. So if the only thing standing between us is a consulting contract, I'll burn it to the ground right now. You don't even know me. I know enough. You know how I take my coffee. That's not the same thing. Then let me know more. His voice dropped even lower, rough with something that sounded almost like desperation. Let me take you somewhere we can actually talk. Let me learn what makes you laugh when you mean it. Let me figure out why you look at Seoul like it's a war you're winning but never enjoying. And then what? Juliette demanded. Let's say I agree. Let's say we have dinner, we talk, we discover we actually like each other. Then what? You're Korean. I'm American. You have family expectations and business obligations and a life here that I'll never fully understand. I'm temporary. My visa is temporary. My contract is temporary. Everything about me in Seoul is designed to end eventually. So we figure it out. How? I don't know. For the first time, Min-jae sounded uncertain. But I know that 6 months from now, if you leave Seoul and I never tried, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. The honesty of it cracked something in Juliette's chest. She'd spent 8 months being strong, being professional, being the confident consultant who never let anyone see her doubts or loneliness or the way she sometimes cried in the shower after particularly brutal days of microaggressions and cultural whiplash. But standing here in the freezing cold wearing Min-jae's jacket, while he looked at her like she was the only person in Seoul who mattered, she was so tired of being strong. "One dinner," she heard herself say. "Somewhere private. No business talk." Something fierce and triumphant flashed across Min-jae's face. "One dinner." "But if this goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that." "I can." Min-jae reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm despite the cold. "Because I've never wanted anything the way I want this. And I don't fail at things I actually care about." Juliette should have had a dozen responses to that. Should have argued about his arrogance. Should have established more boundaries, more rules, more protection against the disaster this would inevitably become. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, just slightly, just enough to acknowledge the truth they'd both been avoiding for months. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Probably. We're going to regret this. Maybe. I should walk away right now, but you won't." Min-jae's thumb traced along her jawline, his eyes tracking the movement like he was memorizing the shape of her face. "Because you're tired of being alone in this city, and I'm tired of pretending I don't notice every time you walk into a room." And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was 6 months of restrained tension finally detonating between two people who had been circling each other like predators. Min-jae's hand slid into her hair, angling her head back as his mouth claimed hers with a possessiveness that should have terrified her. His other hand found her waist, pulling her flush against him until there was no space left between their bodies. Juliette made a sound that might have been protest or surrender. She couldn't tell anymore. Her hands fisted in his shirt as she kissed him back just as desperately, tasting champagne and something darker, something that felt like falling off a cliff in the dark. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Min-jae pressed his forehead against hers. "Tell me you felt that," he said roughly. "I felt it. Tell me I'm not insane." "You're not insane." Juliette's voice shook. "We both are." Min-jae laughed, a low, rough sound that she felt in her chest. He was about to say something else when the terrace door opened behind them. They sprang apart like teenagers caught kissing in the hallway, putting 3 feet of distance between their bodies in under a second. Juliette's heart hammered as she turned to see who had found them. A woman stood in the doorway in white silk and diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. She was beautiful in the way that came from perfect genetics and unlimited wealth. Elegant bone structure, flawless skin, dark hair arranged in an elaborate updo that probably cost more than Juliette's rent. And she was looking at Min-jae like she owned him. "So it's true," the woman said in perfect English, her voice cool and controlled. "You really did come here for her." Min-jae's entire body went rigid. "So Yan." "Hello, Min-jae." The woman's eyes slid to Juliette, assessing her with the efficiency of someone calculating threat levels. "And you must be the American consultant everyone keeps whispering about." Juliette felt ice flood her veins. She didn't need an introduction to know exactly who this woman was. Han So-yeon, Min-jae's ex-fiancée, the woman he'd supposedly ended things with 3 months ago. Except the way So-yeon was looking at Min-jae didn't look like someone who had been left behind. It looked like someone who still had claim. "I didn't realize you were on the guest list tonight," Min-jae said carefully. "My family helped fund this charity. Of course I was invited." So-yeon stepped fully onto the terrace, letting the door close behind her with a soft click. "Though I have to admit I'm surprised to find you here. You hate these events." "Things change. Clearly." So-yeon's gaze returned to Juliette, sharp as a scalpel. "Has he told you about us?" Juliette's throat went dry. "He mentioned you were previously engaged." "Previously?" So-yeon's smile didn't reach her eyes. What a diplomatic way to phrase it. Did he also mention our families have been planning this marriage since we were children? That our engagement represented a merger between 2 of Korea's most powerful business dynasties? That ending, it caused a scandal that cost both our families significant political capital? So-yeon, Min-jae's voice held a warning. "I'm just making sure she understands what she's walking into." So-yeon took a step closer to Juliette. You're a consultant, right? So you understand corporate politics, image, reputation. Surely you realize what Seoul's elite are already saying about the mysterious foreign woman who stole Kang Min-jae away from his fiancé. I didn't steal anyone, Juliette said, forcing her voice to stay steady. And I'm not interested in being part of whatever this is. Too late. So-yeon's expression was almost pitying. The moment you walked into Daesung Entertainment, you became part of it. Everyone who works with Min-jae knows how he operates, how obsessive he gets when he wants something, how he destroys everything in his path to get it. That's enough, Min-jae snapped. Is it? So-yeon turned back to him. Have you told her the truth yet? About why you really ended our engagement? I told her, oh, did you tell her that you ended it literally the same week she joined Daesung as a consultant? That you called off a 10-year relationship after one meeting with a woman you'd never spoken to before? So-yeon's voice remained perfectly controlled, but Juliette heard the rage beneath it. Did you tell her that your mother threatened to remove you from the company entirely when you announced you were breaking the engagement? That your father hasn't spoken to you in 3 months? Each word landed like a punch. Juliette looked at Min-jae and saw the truth written across his face, the guilt, the frustration, the confirmation that everything So-yeon was saying was accurate. I was going to tell her, Min-jae said quietly. When? After you'd already slept with her? After she'd already fallen in love with you and had no choice but to deal with the consequences? So-yeon shook her head. You're selfish, Min-jae. You always have been. You see something you want and you take it without considering who gets hurt in the process. I didn't ask for this, Juliette said, her voice coming out harder than intended. I came to Seoul to do my job. That's it. Whatever happened between you two has nothing to do with me. Doesn't it? So-yeon's gaze was razor sharp. You're an intelligent woman. Surely you've noticed how he watches you, how he finds excuses to be near you, how he's been obsessed with you since the moment you walked into his company. Stop, Min-jae said. Why? She deserves to know the truth. So-yeon looked at Juliette with something that might have been genuine concern. Men like Kang Min-jae don't fall in love, Miss Vale. They become fascinated, obsessed. They pursue with everything they have until they get what they want. And then, once the excitement fades, they move on to the next thing that catches their attention. That's not... It is. So-yeon's voice softened slightly. I was where you are once. Young, ambitious, convinced that his attention meant something real. But the truth is, you're not special. You're just new, different, a challenge he hasn't conquered yet. The words cut deeper than Juliette wanted to admit. Because part of her, the cynical, exhausted part that had survived 8 months of being an outsider, recognized the truth in them. She looked at Min-jae, searching his face for denial, for anger, for anything that would prove So-yeon wrong. Instead, she saw guilt. Is that true? She asked quietly. No, but Min-jae's voice lacked the certainty it had held earlier. It's not like that. Then what is it like? He opened his mouth, closed it, struggled for words that wouldn't come fast enough. And in that hesitation, Juliette felt something inside her crack. I need to go, she said. Juliette, wait. No. She pulled off his jacket and thrust it at him, suddenly desperate to get away from both of them, away from the terrace and the gala and the entire situation before she completely fell apart in front of people who would use her breakdown as entertainment. This was a mistake, all of it. She turned toward the door, but Min-jae caught her arm. Please, he said, and the desperation in his voice almost broke her. Let me explain. Explain what? That your ex-fiancé is right? That I'm just another obsession? Juliette pulled her arm free, anger finally overtaking the hurt. I told you this was a terrible idea. I told you we should stay professional, but you pushed and pushed until I was stupid enough to believe. She stopped herself before she could finish that sentence, before she could admit just how desperately she'd wanted to believe that someone like him could actually want someone like her for real. 5 minutes ago you kissed me like I was oxygen, Min-jae said roughly. Don't tell me that meant nothing. It meant I made a mistake. Juliette stepped back, putting more distance between them. And now I'm fixing it. She didn't wait for his response, didn't look at So-yeon's expression of cold satisfaction. She just turned and walked back into the ballroom, forcing herself not to run, even though every instinct screamed at her to flee. Behind her, she heard Min-jae call her name one more time. She didn't stop. Juliette made it exactly 4 blocks from the gala before her composure shattered. She stood on a street corner in Gangnam, shivering in her thin silk dress, watching taxis stream past in blurs of yellow light. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her clutch. 7 missed calls from Min-jae, 3 text messages she refused to read. Around her, Seoul pulsed with Friday night energy. Couples stumbling out of bars, groups of friends laughing in Korean she only half understood, the neon glow of convenience stores and karaoke joints bleeding color onto wet pavement. She'd never felt more alone in her entire life. A taxi finally stopped. She gave the driver her address in broken Korean and collapsed into the back seat, pressing her forehead against the cold window. Her reflection stared back at her, smudged mascara, hair coming loose from its elegant bun, lipstick kiss-worn and faded. Evidence of the most catastrophic mistake she'd made since arriving in Seoul. The driver kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, clearly concerned. Juliette closed her eyes and pretended to sleep so he'd stop looking. Behind her eyelids, she kept seeing So-yeon's expression of cold pity, kept hearing her voice. "You're not special. You're just new." Her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Another text from Min-jae. "Please let me explain. So-yeon doesn't understand what this is." Juliette almost laughed. What was this? A CEO's obsession with a consultant he'd watched for 6 months like she was a problem he needed to solve? A lonely woman in a foreign country mistaking professional attention for genuine connection? She typed back with numb fingers. "Don't contact me again. This was a mistake." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then turned off her phone entirely. The apartment she rented in Itaewon was small, expensive, and decorated like a hotel room. Impersonal furniture, bland artwork, nothing that revealed who actually lived there. She told herself it was because she was temporary, because putting down roots in Seoul would make it harder to leave when her contract ended. The truth was, she'd been too exhausted to make it feel like home. She kicked off her heels in the entryway and walked straight to the bathroom, turning on the shower as hot as it would go. The silk dress came off in one fluid motion. She stepped under the spray, still wearing her jewelry, and let the water hammer against her skull until her thoughts dissolved into white noise. By the time she finally climbed out, her skin was pink and raw, and the mirror had fogged over completely. She wiped a section clear with her palm and stared at her reflection. "You're so fucking stupid," she told herself. Her reflection didn't argue. She slept badly, waking every 2 hours tangled in sheets that smelled wrong, her mind replaying the terrace scene on an endless loop. Min-jae's hands in her hair, his mouth on hers. The way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in Seoul who mattered. And then So-yeon's voice, surgical and precise. "Men like Kang Min-jae don't fall in love." At 6 in the morning, she gave up on sleep entirely. She made coffee, opened her laptop, and stared at the 17 unread emails in her work inbox without processing a single word. Her phone sat on the counter where she'd left it, still powered off. She should turn it on. Should check in with her firm, respond to client messages, maintain the professional facade that had kept her employed for 8 months. But the thought of seeing more texts from Min-jae made her stomach turn. So she left it off and tried to work instead. By noon, she'd accomplished nothing except finishing an entire pot of coffee and stress-eating her way through a bag of honey butter chips. Her apartment felt like a cage. The walls pressed in closer every time she looked up from her laptop. She needed to get out. Seoul on a Saturday afternoon was a different beast than the polished corporate world she usually navigated. She threw on jeans, an oversized sweater, and walked aimlessly through Itaewon's winding streets, past restaurants and vintage clothing shops and expat bars where English dominated the conversation. Twice she walked past places she'd been meaning to try for months, but had always been too busy or too tired to actually visit. She ended up in a coffee shop that advertised American-style breakfast all day, and ordered pancakes she didn't want just to have something to do with her hands. The waitress brought her food with a bright smile. "Here alone?" "Yeah." "Ah, bad breakup?" Juliette almost laughed. "Something like that." "Seoul men are difficult," the waitress said sympathetically in accented English. "Very handsome, very confusing. You want soju recommendation for later?" "Maybe." The waitress patted her shoulder like they were old friends and disappeared back into the kitchen, leaving Juliette alone with pancakes she couldn't taste and thoughts she couldn't escape. Her phone stayed off until Sunday evening. When she finally powered it on, the notifications flooded in like a dam breaking. 43 text messages, 19 missed calls, 12 voicemails. Most were from Min Jae. 3 were from her firm's senior partner. 1 was from Jin Woo, the startup CEO from the gala. She read Jin Woo's first. "Hey, saw you leave the gala in a hurry on Friday. Hope you're okay. Seoul Gossip Mill is already spinning stories about you and KMJ. Ignore all of it. Want to get coffee this week?" She deleted it without responding. Her firm's messages were more urgent. "Juliette, we need to discuss the Daesung contract. Call me ASAP." Her stomach dropped. She scrolled through Min Jae's texts chronologically, watching his tone shift from desperate to frustrated to something that looked almost like grief. "Please let me explain what happened with So-yeon. I know how it looked. I know what she said. But you're not listening to my side. I ended that engagement because it was destroying me. Because I couldn't marry someone I didn't love while working beside someone I couldn't stop thinking about. You think this is obsession. You think I'm chasing you because you're new or foreign or a challenge. You're wrong. I love you. I know it's too soon to say that. I know it sounds insane, but I've loved you since the first time you stood in my boardroom and refused to back down when my entire executive team tried to intimidate you. Call me. Please. Juliette, I'm going to keep calling until you answer." The final message had been sent 4 hours ago. "If you don't want to see me again, tell me yourself. Don't just disappear." Her hands trembled, holding the phone. The rational part of her brain, the part that had survived 8 months of corporate warfare, knew she should block his number, should maintain professional distance, should treat this like the catastrophic conflict of interest it obviously was. But the lonely, exhausted, desperately touch-starved part of her wanted to call him back, wanted to hear his explanation, wanted to believe that the kiss on the terrace had been real and not just another powerful man playing games with someone he saw as temporary entertainment. She compromised by calling her firm's senior partner instead. David answered on the second ring. "Jesus Christ, Juliette, where the hell have you been? Dealing with personal issues. What's going on?" "What's going on is Kang Min Jae called me Saturday morning and terminated Daesung's entire contract with us. No notice, no explanation, just a formal letter ending the relationship effective immediately." David's voice was tight, with barely controlled anger. "Want to tell me why one of our biggest Asian clients just dropped us 48 hours after you attended a gala where he was present?" Juliette closed her eyes. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it, now." She took a breath and gave him the sanitized version. Min Jae had developed inappropriate feelings. She'd rejected his advances. He'd retaliated by ending the contract. Professional ethics maintained throughout. Nothing that would reflect poorly on the firm. It was mostly true. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that she thought the call had dropped. "David? I'm trying to decide," he said slowly, "whether you're lying to me or just incredibly naive. I'm not... Kang Min Jae didn't end that contract as retaliation, Juliette. He ended it so he could pursue you without ethical conflicts." David's tone shifted into something colder. "And the fact that you're pretending you don't know that makes me question your judgment even more than the situation itself." Juliette's throat tightened. "Nothing happened between us. Something happened enough that Seoul's business community is already circulating rumors about the American consultant who distracted one of Korea's most powerful CEOs away from his fiancée. Ex-fiancée. He ended that engagement months ago. Did he? Because Han So-yeon's family is telling a very different story. They're claiming he broke off a decade-long relationship specifically because of you, that you knowingly interfered with an arranged marriage between 2 prominent families, that your presence at Daesung constituted an inappropriate conflict from the beginning. Each word landed like a physical blow. That's not true. Doesn't matter if it's true. It matters what people believe." David exhaled roughly. "Look, I don't actually care what happened between you and Kang. That's your business. But you just cost this firm a 7-figure annual contract and damaged our reputation with every other Korean client who's now wondering if their consultants are sleeping with their executives." "I didn't sleep with him." Again, doesn't matter. The perception is the problem. Juliette pressed her palm against her forehead, fighting down the panic rising in her chest. "What do you want me to do?" Damage control. Issue a formal statement clarifying that your relationship with Kang Min-jae was strictly professional. Make it clear you had no involvement in his personal decisions. Distance yourself from the situation entirely. And if he contradicts that statement, David's laugh was humorless. Then you're fucked. Because right now, the only thing protecting your career is the assumption that you were a victim of unwanted advances. The moment it looks like you encouraged him, every Korean client we have will drop us. The call ended shortly after that, leaving Juliette alone in her apartment with the full weight of her situation pressing down on her chest. She'd thought the worst part of Friday night was So-yeon's confrontation. She'd been wrong. The worst part was realizing that Min-jae had terminated the contract, not as punishment, but as protection. He'd done exactly what he'd threatened on the terrace, burned down the professional relationship between them so they could be together without ethical complications. And in doing so, he'd destroyed her reputation anyway. She was still sitting in the dark when her doorbell rang at 9 p.m. For a wild second, she thought it might be Min-jae, come to explain in person. But when she opened the door, she found Jin-woo instead, holding a bag of convenience store soju and wearing an expression of genuine concern. "You didn't answer my text," he said, "so I figured I'd check on you in person. Can I come in?" Juliette should have said no, should have maintained boundaries between a casual acquaintance and the disaster currently consuming her life. But she was so tired of being alone that she stepped aside and let him enter. They sat on her couch drinking soju straight from the bottles like college students. Jin-woo didn't push for details, didn't pry into what had happened at the gala. He just kept her company while she slowly got drunk enough to stop thinking about the texts on her phone. "Seoul is brutal," he said eventually, "especially if you're an outsider. The rules are different here, the expectations are different, and people like Kang Min-jae," he trailed off, shaking his head. "What about people like him? They don't understand what it's like to be anyone other than themselves. They're born into power, raised to believe they can have anything they want, surrounded by people who never tell them no." Jin-woo took another drink. "I'm not saying he's a bad person, just that he operates in a completely different reality than the rest of us. He told me he loved me." The words came out before Juliette could stop them, raw and honest in the dim light of her apartment. Jin-woo looked at her for a long moment. "Do you believe him?" "I don't know." "Then that's your answer." They finished the soju in silence. Jin-woo left around midnight with a promise to check on her again later that week. Juliette locked the door behind him and stood in her empty apartment, staring at her phone where 17 unread messages from Min-jae waited like landmines. She opened the most recent one. "I know you're angry. I know this is complicated, but I meant every word I said on that terrace. If you'll let me, I'll prove it." Her thumb hovered over the reply button. She thought about So-yeon's warning. Men like him don't fall in love. They become obsessed. She thought about David's threat. Distance yourself entirely. She thought about Min-jae's hands in her hair, his mouth on hers, the desperation in his voice when he'd said her name. And then she thought about what she wanted. Not what was professional, not what was safe, not what would protect her reputation. What did she want? She typed, "We need to talk, in person." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then sat down hard on the couch and waited for her phone to light up with his response. It came 30 seconds later. "Where and when?" "My apartment. Tomorrow after work. I'll be there." Juliette set her phone down and pressed both hands against her face, wondering if she'd just made the second worst decision of her life, or the bravest. Monday arrived with all the mercy of a firing squad. Juliette showed up at her firm's Seoul office at 8 a.m. sharp, wearing her most severe business suit like armor. The moment she walked in, conversation stopped. People looked away. Someone whispered something in Korean that she didn't catch but recognized the tone of anyway. Gossip, speculation, judgment. She held her head high and walked to her office without acknowledging any of it. David was waiting inside, arms crossed, expression grim. "We need to discuss your statement," he said without preamble. They spent 2 hours crafting careful language. Professional relationship maintained throughout, no personal involvement, deeply regret any misunderstanding, committed to ethical standards. Every sentence designed to protect the firm, while subtly implying Juliette had been a victim of unwanted attention rather than a willing participant. It made her feel dirty just reading it. "This goes public tomorrow," David said. "I'm giving you 24 hours to make sure Kang doesn't contradict it. If he releases his own statement claiming you two were involved, this whole thing gets worse. He won't. You sound very confident for someone who claims they barely know him. Juliette met his eyes. I'm confident because I know he wouldn't sabotage me like that. Then you know him better than you're admitting. She didn't have an answer to that. The rest of the day dragged like walking through concrete. She fielded emails, attended virtual meetings, pretended everything was normal while her phone burned a hole in her pocket with the knowledge that Min-jae would be at her apartment in 6 hours. By the time 5 p.m. rolled around, her hands were shaking. She left the office early, took a taxi home, and spent 45 minutes trying to decide what to wear before giving up and staying in her work clothes. This wasn't a date. It was a confrontation. A conversation about boundaries and consequences, and whether anything between them was real enough to justify the disaster it had already caused. Min-jae arrived exactly on time. Juliette opened the door and found him standing in her hallway, looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes that made him look almost human. The tattoos on his throat seemed darker somehow, angrier, like they'd absorbed his frustration. "Come in," she said. He entered her apartment carefully, like he was afraid she'd change her mind and kick him out. His eyes swept the space, taking in the minimal furniture, the lack of personal touches, the suitcase still visible in her bedroom because she'd never fully unpacked. "You live like you're ready to run," he said quietly. "I am." Juliette closed the door and leaned against it, maintaining distance between them. "That's what temporary means. Is that what you want? To run?" "I don't know what I want anymore." She crossed her arms. "Friday night you told me you loved me, that you'd ended your engagement because of me, that you'd been watching me for 6 months like some kind of obsession, and then your ex-fiancée showed up and told me you're exactly the kind of man who destroys everything he touches." Soyeon doesn't know what she's talking about, doesn't she? Because from where I'm standing, her version of events makes a lot more sense than yours. Juliette pushed off the door, anger finally overriding caution. "You ended a 10-year engagement after 1 meeting with me. You terminated a multi-million-dollar contract so you could pursue me without ethical conflicts. You've been watching me for months without ever actually talking to me like a normal human being. That's not love, Min-jae. That's obsession. And what if it is?" His voice came out rough, strained. "What if I am obsessed with you? Would that make what I feel less real?" "It would make it dangerous." "For who?" "For me," the words exploded out of her. "I came to Seoul to build my career, to prove I could succeed in one of the most difficult markets in the world. And in 3 days, you've managed to destroy my professional reputation, cost my firm a major contract, and turn me into gossip fodder for Seoul's business elite. All because you decided you wanted me." Min-jae flinched like she'd slapped him. "I didn't mean for any of that to happen. But it did happen. And now I have to issue a public statement tomorrow claiming we had no personal relationship just so my firm doesn't fire me for ethical violations." "Then don't issue it." "What?" "Don't lie." Min-jae took a step closer, his expression fierce. "Don't pretend Friday night didn't happen. Don't erase what we are just because other people are uncomfortable with it." "What are we, Min-jae? You kissed me once? That doesn't make us anything. It makes us honest." Another step. "It makes us 2 people who've been circling each other for 6 months too afraid to admit what we both felt." "What I felt was attraction. That's not the same thing as what? As love?" He closed the remaining distance between them, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. "Say it. Say you don't feel anything real for me, and I'll walk out of here right now." Juliette opened her mouth. The words should have been simple, professional. A clear boundary between consultant and client, between appropriate and catastrophic. But nothing came out, because the truth was she'd been half in love with him since the second meeting, when he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. When he'd asked questions about her analysis that showed he'd actually read every word of her report. When he'd defended her proposal to his board, even though it contradicted his father's legacy strategy. She'd told herself it was professionalism. Told herself he was just a good client who respected her work. Told herself the flutter in her chest when he walked into meetings was anxiety, not anticipation. She'd been lying to herself for months. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't what?" "Can't say it doesn't feel real." Her voice cracked. But that doesn't mean we should do this. It doesn't mean it's worth destroying everything we've both built. I don't care about what I've built. Min-jae reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in both hands. I spent 5 years building an empire I don't even want, playing a role my father wrote for me before I was born. And then you walked into my boardroom and I remembered what it felt like to actually want something. You don't want me. You want the idea of me. But even as she said it, Juliette leaned into his touch. You want someone who makes you feel like you're rebelling against your family, against expectations, against the life you're supposed to live. No. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I want the woman who argued with me for 20 minutes about market projections because she refused to let me make a stupid decision just because I was the CEO. I want the woman who works until 3 a.m., even though no one's watching, because she can't stand doing anything less than perfectly. I want the woman who looks at Seoul like it's a war she's winning but never enjoying. The words hit too close to home. I'm not staying in Seoul forever, she said desperately. My visa is temporary. My contract is temporary. Even if we try this, it has an expiration date. Then we'll figure it out. How? I don't know. Min-jae leaned his forehead against hers, close enough that she could feel his breath on her lips. But I know that if I let you walk away because I was too afraid of complications, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Your family will hate me. They already do. Seoul's elite will destroy my reputation. Let them try. His voice turned hard. Anyone who comes after you comes through me first. That's not... He kissed her before she could finish the sentence. Not gentle like before, not tentative or careful. This was 6 months of restraint detonating between two people who'd been pretending they didn't want each other. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head back as his mouth claimed hers with bruising intensity. Juliette made a sound somewhere between protest and surrender, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as her rational brain screamed that this was a mistake, that they were making everything worse, that kissing him wouldn't solve any of the problems currently destroying both their lives. But she kissed him back anyway. Kissed him like she was drowning, and he was oxygen. Kissed him like 6 months of loneliness and exhaustion could be erased by the desperate press of mouths and the tangle of breath. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Min-jae pressed his lips to her forehead. Tell me you feel that, he said roughly. I feel it. Tell me I'm not insane. We're both insane, Juliette's voice shook. This is going to destroy us. Then we'll burn together. He kissed her again, slower this time, but no less intense. His hands slid down her sides, learning the shape of her through layers of professional clothing. She arched into him, 6 months of distance collapsing into heated proximity. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Juliette knew she should stop this, should push him away, should maintain the boundaries that would protect what was left of her career. But she was so tired of being professional, so tired of being strong, so tired of pretending she didn't want exactly this. They moved toward her bedroom in stumbling steps, mouths still locked together, hands pulling at buttons and zippers. Her suit jacket hit the floor, his tie followed. By the time they reached her bed, half their clothes had been abandoned in a trail behind them. Min-jae pulled back just long enough to look at her, really look at her, with an expression that made her chest ache. Last chance, he said. Tell me to stop and I will. Juliette reached up and pulled him down to her. Don't stop. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like sex and poor decisions, both breathing hard, both trying to process what they'd just done. Juliette's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She ignored it. Min-jae traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his expression unreadable in the dim light. What happens now? I don't know. That statement your firm wants you to issue tomorrow I can't issue it now. Juliette laughed, but it came out hollow. Not after this. Good. Good? Min-jae, I just slept with a former client. That's exactly the ethical violation they're trying to avoid. Former client, he emphasized. I terminated that contract so we wouldn't have this problem. And in doing so, you made everything worse. Then what would you have preferred? That I kept the contract and we both spent the next year pretending we didn't want each other? Juliette rolled onto her side to face him. I would have preferred you giving me a choice. You made all these decisions, ending your engagement, terminating the contract, confessing your feelings, without ever asking what I wanted. What do you want? The question hung in the air between them. I want, Juliette said slowly, to not lose everything I've built in Seoul because of this. I want to not become known as the woman who slept her way into a CEO's attention. I want to not have to choose between my career and whatever this is between us. And if you have to choose, she looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd just destroyed professional boundaries and social expectations and his own family's plans because he couldn't stop wanting her. At the tattoos that made him look dangerous and the exhaustion in his eyes that made him look human. At the mess they'd just created together. I don't know, she admitted. Her phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Min-jae reached over and grabbed it from the nightstand, glancing at the screen. His expression shifted into something dark and furious. What? Juliette asked. He handed her the phone without a word. 7 missed calls from David. 3 from numbers she didn't recognize, and 1 news alert that made her stomach drop through the floor. Breaking. Kang Min-jae spotted entering foreign consultant's apartment building. Engagement scandal deepens. Below the headline was a photo, slightly blurry but unmistakably showing Min-jae in her building's lobby, taken less than 2 hours ago. Someone had been watching. Someone had been waiting. Someone had documented the exact moment he'd entered her apartment. And now all of Seoul knew. Fuck, Juliette whispered. It's fine, Min-jae said, but his voice was tight. We'll handle it. Handle it how? The photo proves we're involved. There's no statement we can issue that will make this go away. Then we don't deny it. He sat up, running both hands through his hair. We confirm it. We tell the truth. The truth will destroy my career. Or it will force everyone to accept that we're together. Min-jae turned to look at her. I'm done hiding this. I'm done pretending. If Seoul wants a scandal, we'll give them one. Before Juliette could respond, her phone rang. David's name lit up the screen. She answered with shaking hands. David, you need to come to the office. Now. His voice was ice cold. We have a situation. I know, I saw the photo. The photo is the least of your problems. Han So-yeon's family just issued a formal statement claiming you knowingly interfered with their daughter's engagement. They're threatening legal action for reputational damage. The room tilted sideways. They can't do that. They're doing it. And unless you can prove your relationship with Kang didn't start until after his engagement ended, you're looking at a lawsuit that will destroy not just your career but the entire firm's reputation in Korea. David exhaled roughly. Get here now, and don't bring him. The call ended. Juliette sat frozen, still naked in her bed, staring at nothing while her world collapsed in real time. Min-jae reached for her, but she pulled away, climbing out of bed and starting to gather her discarded clothes. Where are you going? My office. They're threatening to sue me. Her voice came out mechanical, distant. So-yeon's family is claiming I interfered with your engagement. That's bullshit. I'll tell them the truth, Your truth doesn't matter. She spun to face him, fury and panic warring in her chest. Don't you understand? It doesn't matter when your engagement actually ended. It matters what people believe. And right now, everyone in Seoul believes I'm the foreign homewrecker who stole you away from your perfect Korean fiancé. Then I'll make them believe otherwise. How? By issuing a statement saying you fell in love with me while you were still engaged? That'll make it so much better. Min-jae stood, pulling on his pants. I'll fix this. You can't fix this. You've already made it worse by coming here. By being photographed entering my building. By... Her voice cracked. This is exactly what So-yeon warned me about. You destroy everything you touch. The words hung in the air like poison. Min-jae's expression shuddered completely. Is that what you think? I think you're a man who's used to getting what he wants regardless of the consequences. And I think I was stupid enough to become another thing you decided to take. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Juliette pulled on her shirt with shaking hands. You gotta make all the dramatic gestures. You gotta end your engagement and terminate contracts and confess your feelings like some kind of romantic hero. But I'm the one dealing with the actual fallout. I'm the one whose career is being destroyed. I'm the one facing a lawsuit from one of Korea's most powerful families. I'll handle the lawsuit. I don't need you to handle it. I need you to... She stopped, pressing both hands against her face. I need you to leave. Silence. When she looked up, Min-jae was staring at her like she'd just driven a knife between his ribs. You're serious? I have to go deal with my firm, and you being here makes everything worse. So what? We just pretend this didn't happen? Pretend you didn't just… Please. The word came out broken. Please, just go. For a long moment, Min-jae didn't move. Then he finished dressing in silence, each movement precise and controlled. He walked to her door, paused with his hand on the handle. I meant what I said Friday night, he told her without turning around. I love you, and I'll prove it whether you believe me or not. Then he left, and Juliette was alone in her apartment, surrounded by evidence of the most catastrophic mistake she'd ever made. She finished dressing, called a taxi, and headed to her firm's office at 9 p.m. on a Monday night to face the consequences of wanting something she should have known better than to reach for. The meeting lasted 3 brutal hours. David and 2 senior partners grilled her about every interaction she'd ever had with Min-jae. Every meeting, every email, every conversation. They wanted dates, details, documentation proving the relationship had started after the contract termination. Juliette provided what she could, but the truth was there was no clean timeline. The attraction had started months ago. The emotional connection had been building since her first presentation, and now that it had finally detonated into physical reality, there was no way to spin it that didn't make her look complicit. This is a disaster, one of the partners said flatly. Han So-yeon's family has significant political influence. If they decide to make an example of you, they can get you deported. Juliette's blood ran cold. Deported? Your visa is tied to your employment. If we terminate you for ethical violations, you have 30 days to leave Korea. You're firing me? We're considering it. David wouldn't meet her eyes. The firm can't afford to be associated with this scandal. Every Korean client we have is watching to see how we handle it. If we protect you, we lose them. If we fire you, we might be able to salvage our reputation. So I'm just collateral damage. You created this situation, the partner snapped. You knew the risks of getting involved with a client. Former client. He terminated the contract specifically to avoid ethical conflicts. That doesn't matter. The perception… I know. The perception is the problem. Juliette stood, exhaustion making her limbs feel like lead. Is there anything else? Don't contact Kang Min-jae, David said. Don't make any public statements. Don't do anything that could make this worse. She left the office at midnight feeling like a ghost, took a taxi home through empty streets, climbed into bed still wearing her clothes, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Her phone buzzed once. A text from Min-jae. I'm sorry. I'll fix this. I promise. She didn't respond. Tuesday morning, Seoul woke up to a new headline. Kang Min-jae holds emergency press conference. I take full responsibility. Juliette watched the live stream from her apartment, her stomach in knots. Min-jae stood in front of a wall of reporters, looking exhausted but defiant. No notes, no prepared statement, just raw, brutal honesty delivered in Korean and English. The rumors circulating about my relationship with Juliette Vale are true, he said. We are involved. That involvement did not begin until after I ended my engagement to Han So-yeon 3 months ago. Miss Vale had no knowledge of my engagement when we first met, and she bears no responsibility for my decision to end it. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I ended my engagement, Min-jae continued, his voice cutting through the chaos, because I could not marry someone I didn't love while working beside someone I did. That decision was mine alone. Any claims that Miss Vale interfered with my personal life are categorically false. What about the ethical concerns? A reporter shouted. I terminated Daesung Entertainment's contract with her firm specifically to eliminate any professional conflicts. We are no longer in a business relationship. What happens between us personally is no one's concern but ours. Your family has issued statements condemning this relationship. My family, Min-jae interrupted, his expression hardening, does not control my personal life. I am resigning from all family-controlled corporate boards effective immediately. Daesung Entertainment will continue to operate as an independent entity without their influence. The room exploded with noise. Juliette stared at the screen, unable to process what she was hearing. He was publicly cutting ties with his family, giving up board positions, risking billions in family wealth, all to protect her from the scandal he'd created. Why are you doing this? Another reporter demanded. Min-jae looked directly into the camera. Because some things matter more than reputation, and I'm done pretending otherwise. The press conference ended in chaos. Reporters swarmed, questions overlapped. But Min-jae just walked off stage without answering any of them. Juliette's phone started ringing immediately. David, the senior partners, numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them. Instead, she sat in her apartment staring at the frozen image of Min-jae's face on her laptop screen, wondering if she'd just witnessed the most romantic gesture of her life or the most destructive act of self-sabotage she'd ever seen. Her doorbell rang. She wasn't surprised when she opened it and found Min-jae standing there, still wearing the same suit from the press conference, looking like he'd just declared war on his entire life. "You're insane," she said. "Probably. You just destroyed your relationship with your family." "I know." "You risked billions in corporate positions." "I know." "Why?" Min-jae looked at her with eyes that held no regret whatsoever. "Because I meant it when I said I love you, and I'm done letting other people's opinions control my life." He stepped closer. "I know you're terrified. I know this is complicated. I know your firm is probably threatening to fire you, and So-yeon's family is probably threatening to sue you, and all of Seoul is probably talking about what a disaster we are. But I don't care. You should care. I don't. And neither should you." He reached up and cupped her face in both hands. "We can keep fighting this. Keep pretending it doesn't matter. Keep trying to protect ourselves from the consequences. Or we can stop running and face it together." Juliette's eyes burned. "I could lose everything. Then we'll build something new." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Min-jae pressed his forehead against hers. "Either you want this or you don't. Either I'm worth the risk or I'm not. Stop overthinking and tell me the truth." The truth. The truth was, she'd been half in love with him for 6 months. The truth was, Friday night on the terrace had been the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of her life. The truth was, she'd spent 8 months being professional and lonely and exhausted, and the only time she'd felt truly alive in Seoul was when she was with him. But the truth was also that she was terrified. Terrified of losing her career. Terrified of becoming dependent on a man's protection. Terrified that So-yeon had been right, and this was just obsession that would burn out once the excitement faded. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," she whispered. "You're the strongest person I've ever met." Min-jae's thumb traced her cheekbone. "You survived 8 months in a country that fought you every step of the way. You built a reputation from nothing. You walked into my boardroom and refused to back down even when everyone tried to intimidate you. You're strong enough. And if this doesn't work, then at least we tried." Juliette closed her eyes, felt the warmth of his hands on her face, heard the absolute certainty in his voice, recognized the choice she was being offered: safety or truth, protection or risk, loneliness or love. She thought about So-yeon's warning: men like him don't fall in love. She thought about David's threat: this will destroy your career. She thought about 8 months of surviving Seoul without ever actually living in it, and then she stopped thinking entirely. She opened her eyes, looked directly at the man who'd just risked everything for her, and made the single most terrifying decision of her life. "Okay," she said. Min-jae's expression shifted into something fierce and possessive. "Okay?" "Okay." Juliette grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him inside, kicking the door closed behind them. "Let's burn together." This time when he kissed her, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like falling off a cliff in the dark and discovering you could fly. The morning after Min-jae's press conference, Seoul woke up with their names in every headline. Juliette stood in her apartment kitchen, watching her phone explode with notifications while Min-jae made coffee like this was normal, like they hadn't just become the most talked about scandal in Korea's business community, like his hands weren't shaking slightly as he measured grounds into the filter. She'd let him stay the night, not for sex, though that had happened too, fierce and desperate, and nothing like the careful intimacy she'd imagined with previous partners. No, she'd let him stay because the alternative was being alone with the enormity of what they'd just done, and she wasn't strong enough for that yet. "Stop reading the comments," Min-jae said without turning around. "I'm not. You're holding your phone at exactly the angle you hold it when you're scrolling, and your jaw is tight." He glanced over his shoulder. "Whatever they're saying doesn't matter." "Easy for you to say. You're the CEO who dramatically chose love over family expectations. I'm the foreign woman who destroyed Korea's most eligible bachelor." Juliette set her phone down harder than necessary. The narrative is very different depending on which side of the gender divide you're standing on. Then we changed the narrative. How? Min-jae brought her coffee, black, no sugar, exactly the way she took it, and leaned against the counter facing her. In the morning light filtering through her apartment windows, he looked exhausted but resolute. The tattoos on his throat seemed softer somehow, less threatening in the domestic context of her kitchen. "We don't hide, Wasis," he said. "We don't apologize. We live our lives and force everyone to accept it. That's not a strategy. That's just stubbornness. It's the only strategy that works." He took a drink of his own coffee. Seoul operates on perception and power. Right now, they see us as a scandal because we're acting like we have something to be ashamed of. The moment we stop acting guilty, the story changes. And if it doesn't, then we deal with it together. Juliette wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his confidence would somehow shield them from the consequences already circling like sharks. But she'd spent 8 months learning how Seoul's elite operated, and she knew better than to underestimate their capacity for cruelty when someone violated their unspoken rules. Her phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. She answered on speaker. "This better not be another lecture." "It's not." David's voice was clipped, professional, stripped of the anger from their previous conversations. "The senior partners met this morning. We've decided not to terminate your contract." Juliette's breath caught. "What?" Kang's press conference changed the optics. "If we fire you now, it looks like we're punishing you for his actions. The narrative becomes foreign woman scapegoated by her own firm, rather than consultant violated ethical standards. Neither option is good, but the first one is worse for our reputation. So I still have a job. For now. But you're on probation. No new client assignments until this blows over. You'll work remotely on documentation and internal projects. And if So Yeon's family follows through with their lawsuit, we're reserving the right to revisit this decision." It wasn't forgiveness. It was damage control dressed up as mercy. "Understood," Juliette said. "And Juliette?" David's tone shifted slightly. "Whatever you're doing with Kang, be careful. Men like him don't stay interested once the chase is over." The call ended before she could respond. Min-jae set down his coffee cup with controlled precision. "He's wrong. Maybe. Maybe not." Juliette looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who'd blown up his life for her after 6 months of watching from a distance. "You barely know me, Min-jae. You know how I take my coffee and that I work too much and that I'm lonely in Seoul. That's not the same as actually knowing someone. Then let me know you. What if you don't like what you find? What if I do?" He moved closer, crowding into her space the way he always did when he wanted her full attention. "You're terrified I'm going to get bored, that this is just obsession that'll burn out once the excitement fades. But you're wrong. How can you be so sure?" "Because I've been obsessed with things before. Companies I wanted to acquire, markets I wanted to dominate, strategies I wanted to perfect." His hand found her waist, thumb pressing against her hip bone through her thin sleep shirt. "This isn't that. This is looking at you across a conference table and forgetting every word of the presentation because I'm too busy watching the way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're thinking. This is lying awake at 3 a.m, wondering if you're still at your office or if you finally went home to sleep. This is wanting to know every single thing that made you into the person standing in front of me." Juliette's throat tightened. "That sounds like obsession." "Maybe it is, but it's also love." He pressed his forehead against hers. "And I'm done pretending there's a difference." She kissed him because she didn't have words for what she was feeling, because despite every logical reason to run, she wanted to stay. Because for the first time in 8 months, Seoul felt less lonely. They spent the day in her apartment pretending the outside world didn't exist. Min-jae made calls to his company from her couch, speaking rapid Korean into his phone, while Juliette worked remotely on tedious documentation projects. It felt absurdly domestic, like they were a couple who'd been together for years rather than 2 people who'd just detonated their professional lives. But by evening, reality started seeping back in. Juliette's phone buzzed with a news alert. Han family. Spokesperson. Legal action against foreign consultant imminent. She showed Min Jae the headline. He read it in silence, jaw tightening. They won't win, he said. They don't have to win. They just have to make the lawsuit painful enough that I leave Korea voluntarily. Then I'll handle it. You can't handle everything, Min Jae. This isn't a business deal you can negotiate. Juliette paced her small living room, anxiety spiking through her bloodstream. Soyeon's family has political connections, money, influence. What do I have? A firm that's keeping me on probation out of self-interest and a boyfriend who's already sacrificed too much. So what do you want to do? The question stopped her cold. What did she want? To fight a lawsuit she couldn't afford against a family with unlimited resources? To stay in Seoul knowing every professional contact she'd built would distance themselves from the scandal? To keep putting Min Jae in positions where he had to choose between her and his own family? I don't know, she admitted. Min Jae stood, crossing the room to where she'd frozen mid-pace. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to say it. I'm afraid of a lot of things right now. Then tell me, all of it. So she did. She told him about the microaggressions she'd endured for 8 months, the investors who'd spoken over her in meetings, the executives who'd questioned her qualifications, the casual racism dressed up as curiosity about where she was really from. She told him about the loneliness of being perpetually foreign in a country that would never fully accept her. She told him about the dreams she'd had before Seoul, dreams that didn't involve lawsuits and scandals and public humiliation. And she told him the truth she'd been avoiding since Friday night, that part of her wanted to just leave. To go back to the States where at least the racism was familiar, where she wouldn't have to translate every interaction through layers of cultural difference, where she could build a career without worrying that one relationship would destroy everything. Min Jae listened without interrupting. When she finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. If you want to leave Seoul, he said carefully, I won't stop you. But I will follow you. He caught her hand, threading their fingers together. New York, LA, Chicago. Wherever you go, I'll be there. I'll sell my stake in Daesung if I have to. I'll start over completely. Because you're right that Seoul is difficult for you in ways it will never be for me. But that doesn't mean we can't build something somewhere else. The offer was so staggering, so immediate, that Juliette couldn't process it. You'd leave Korea? For you? Yes. You'd give up your company? I'd give up everything. He said it like it was simple, like walking away from billions in assets and a legacy he'd spent 5 years building was equivalent to changing restaurants. The only thing I won't give up is you. Juliette pulled her hand free, taking a step back. That's insane. Why? Because we've been together for less than a week, because you don't uproot your entire life for someone you barely know. I know you. You know the version of me that exists at work? The professional consultant who has her shit together? You don't know what I'm like when I'm depressed or anxious or so homesick I can't get out of bed? You don't know how I treat people when I'm stressed or what I'm like during an argument, or whether I'm even capable of the kind of commitment you're asking for. Then let me find out. What if you don't like what you discover? Min Jae's expression shifted into something raw. What if you're the one who gets bored? What if 6 months from now you realize I'm just another workaholic CEO who doesn't know how to be in a relationship? What if the tattoos and the dangerous reputation were more interesting than the reality of who I actually am? The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in her chest. I'm not going to get bored, she said quietly. How do you know? Because I've been watching you too. For 6 months I've been noticing the way you defend your employees in meetings, the way you actually read every report instead of just skimming summaries, the way you're terrifying in boardrooms but gentle with your assistant when she makes mistakes. She stepped closer. I know what it's like to be obsessed with someone from a distance, and this isn't that either. They stood in her small living room as Seoul's lights began to glow through the windows. Two people who'd just admitted they were equally terrified of what they were building. Min Jae reached for her slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he wrapped his arms around her and held on like she was the only solid thing in his world. We're going to survive this, he said against her hair. Juliette wanted desperately to believe him. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later. Juliette was working from her apartment when the courier delivered the thick envelope of legal documents. She signed for it with shaking hands, then sat on her couch staring at the Korean legal terminology she only half understood. Min-jae arrived 20 minutes after she called him, still wearing a suit from whatever meeting he'd left early. He read through the documents with the lawyer on speakerphone, his expression getting darker with each page. "It's worse than I thought," he said after hanging up. "How much worse?" "They're not just claiming reputational damage. They're alleging fraud, that you misrepresented your relationship status to secure consulting contracts, that you used personal relationships to gain unfair business advantages, that you deliberately interfered with So-yeon's engagement for professional gain." Each accusation felt like a physical blow. "That's not true. None of that is true." "I know, but they have enough circumstantial evidence to make it ugly. The timing of our contract, the termination happening right before we got together publicly, So-yeon's testimony about the gala." Min-jae set the papers down carefully, like they might detonate. "They're going to drag this out for months, destroy your reputation piece by piece, make it impossible for you to work anywhere in Asia. So they win. Not if we fight back." "With what?" "I can't afford lawyers who can go up against the Han family. My firm won't pay for my defense, and even if I could fight, I'd spend the next year of my life in depositions and court appearances instead of actually building my career." Min-jae was quiet for too long. "What?" Juliette demanded. "I'll pay for your legal defense. The best lawyers in Seoul. We'll countersue for harassment, defamation, whatever it takes to make them back down." "No." "Juliette." "I said no." She stood, anger overriding fear for the first time since opening the envelope. "I'm not going to become the woman who needs her boyfriend to fight her battles. I came to Seoul to build my own reputation, my own career, my own life. If I let you pay for lawyers and countersue on my behalf, every single person in this city will say I'm exactly what So-yeon's family claims, a woman using personal relationships for professional advantage. That's ridiculous. Accepting help doesn't make you weak. It does when the help comes from the man I'm sleeping with." Juliette paced the length of her small living room. "Don't you see? This is exactly the trap they're setting. Either I fight alone and lose because I can't afford adequate defense, or I let you help and prove their narrative that I'm using you." "Then what do you want to do?" "I don't know." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I don't fucking know, Min-jae. Every option is terrible. Stay and fight a lawsuit I can't win. Leave and let them claim victory. Take your money and confirm everyone's worst assumptions. There's no good choice here." "Then make a bad choice. But make it." She stopped pacing. "What?" "Stop trying to find the perfect solution. There isn't one." Min-jae stood, closing the distance between them. "You're so terrified of making the wrong decision that you're paralyzed. But doing nothing is also a choice. And it's the worst one." "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one whose entire career is on the line." "No, I'm just the one who destroyed his relationship with his family, resigned from half his corporate positions, and became a public scandal in a country where reputation is everything." His voice was hard now, frustration bleeding through the control. "Don't act like I haven't sacrificed anything for this." "I never asked you to sacrifice anything." "I know. That's the problem." Min-jae's composure finally cracked. "You keep acting like I did all this to trap you or control you or turn you into some kind of dependent. But I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. Because I was dying pretending I didn't want you. Because every day I spent watching you from a distance was another day I hated my own life a little more." The raw honesty of it stopped her anger cold. "You were dying," she repeated quietly. "Yes. Because of me. Because of wanting you and not being able to have you. Because of building a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty every single morning when I woke up." He ran both hands through his hair, destroying its careful styling. "So yes, I blew up my engagement. Yes, I terminated contracts and destroyed professional relationships and made choices that hurt people. But I did it because staying in that life was killing me slowly. You just gave me a reason to finally escape." Juliette sank back onto the couch, processing his words. She'd been so focused on her own loss of control, her own fear of dependence, that she hadn't considered what his life had actually been like before her. Hadn't thought about what it meant to be groomed from birth for a specific role, to have every major decision made by committee, to live under the constant weight of family expectations and social obligation. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what? For assuming this was all about me, for not realizing you were just as trapped as I was." Min-jae sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. "We're both trapped, just in different ways, but at least now we're trapped together." She almost smiled. "That's a terrible romantic sentiment." "I'm bad at romance." "Yeah, I've noticed." They sat in silence for a moment, the lawsuit papers scattered across her coffee table like evidence of their collective failure to navigate Seoul's social complexities. "I can't take your money," Juliette said finally, "but I also can't fight this alone, so I need you to help me find a third option." "What kind of third option?" "I don't know yet, but there has to be something between let you pay for everything and roll over and let the Han family destroy me. We just have to find it." Min-jae nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll figure it out. Together. Together." He kissed her temple, and Juliette let herself lean into him, borrowing his certainty for just a moment while she gathered enough strength to keep fighting. The third option appeared from an unexpected source. 2 days after the lawsuit arrived, Juliette got a call from Jin Woo, the startup CEO she'd met at the gala, what felt like a lifetime ago. "I heard about the lawsuit," he said without preamble, "and I have a proposition for you." They met at a cafe in Itaewon, far enough from Seoul's business district that they were unlikely to run into anyone who mattered. Jin Woo arrived looking rumpled and caffeinated, carrying a tablet loaded with what appeared to be a business proposal. "I'm launching a new consulting collective," he explained. "Independent contractors who work together on projects but aren't tied to traditional firms. No corporate hierarchy, no ethical conflicts from client relationships, no Seoul old guard telling us how to operate. And you're telling me this because you're exactly the kind of consultant we need. Brilliant, experienced, willing to challenge conventional thinking, and currently unemployable by any traditional firm in Korea because of your personal life." Jin Woo slid the tablet across the table. "Join us. Build your own practice. Control your own reputation." Juliette scrolled through the proposal, her heart rate picking up as she processed what he was offering. It wasn't a job. It was a platform. A way to keep working without needing firm support or approval from Seoul's business elite. "This doesn't solve the lawsuit," she said. No, but it solves the professional isolation, and it changes the narrative." Jin Woo leaned forward. "Right now, you're the consultant who got fired for sleeping with a client. Join us, and you become the consultant who was so good she started her own practice. It's not perfect, but it's better than what you have now." "Why are you helping me?" "Because Seoul's business culture is toxic, and someone needs to push back against it. Also because I'm petty, and I enjoy watching rich families get mad when their power plays don't work." He grinned. "And honestly, having you as a founding member would give our collective instant credibility." It was mercenary and practical, and exactly what she needed. "I'm in," Juliette said. "Yeah?" "Yeah, but I need 2 weeks to deal with the lawsuit first. Take whatever time you need. The collective isn't officially launching for a month anyway." They shook hands across the cafe table, and for the first time since the gala, Juliette felt something that resembled hope. She told Min-jae about the collective that evening. He listened carefully, asked questions about the business structure and funding model, and finally nodded. "It's good," he said. "It gives you independence." "That bother you?" "Why would it?" "Because you like controlling things." "I like controlling my own life, not yours." He pulled her onto his lap where they sat on her couch, wrapping both arms around her waist. "And honestly, watching you build something that's entirely yours is attractive as hell." Juliette kissed him, slow and deep, trying to pour 6 months of restrained tension and 3 days of fear into the press of mouths. When they broke apart, both breathing harder, she pressed her forehead against his. "We're going to survive this," she said. "I know. How are you so sure?" "Because we're both too stubborn to let Seoul's elite win." She laughed despite everything. "That's still not a strategy. It's the only strategy that matters." That night, wrapped in Min-jae's arms while Seoul glowed through her windows, Juliette let herself believe they might actually be okay. She should have known better. The betrayal came from the one person she hadn't been watching. A week after joining Jin Woo's collective, Juliette got a message from an unknown number. "You should know what your boyfriend is really doing behind your back. Check the attachment. She almost deleted it as spam. But something made her open the attached file instead. It was a legal document, dense Korean legal terminology that she had to run through translation apps to fully understand. But once she did, her blood went cold. Min-jae had filed a countersuit against the Han family. Not with her knowledge, not with her permission. He'd gone behind her back and done exactly what she'd explicitly told him not to do. The lawsuit claimed defamation, harassment, and interference with business relationships. It demanded substantial damages, and it was filed under both their names, making her an official plaintiff in a legal battle she'd never agreed to join. Juliette's hand shook as she read through the details. Each page made it worse. He'd hired the most expensive lawyers in Seoul, set up a defense fund, prepared counterarguments that would drag So-yeon's personal life into public scrutiny. He'd taken every choice away from her. She was still sitting in numb shock when her door opened and Min-jae walked in using the spare key she'd given him 3 days ago. He was carrying takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant, smiling like this was a normal evening. That smile died when he saw her face. What happened? Juliette held up her phone, displaying the legal document. Want to explain this? Min-jae went very still. Who sent you that? Does it matter? Is it real? Silence. Min-jae, is it real? Yes. The word detonated between them like a grenade. You filed a lawsuit in my name without telling me. I was going to tell you. When? After it was too late for me to object? Juliette stood, fury making her voice shake. I specifically told you not to do this. I specifically said I didn't want to fight back through legal action. And you did it anyway. Because you're letting them destroy you. Min-jae set down the takeout with controlled precision. You think joining some startup collective is going to protect you from the Han family? They'll crush that too. They'll make sure no one in Seoul works with you. They'll drag your name through every business circle until you have no choice but to leave Korea entirely. Then maybe I should leave. Is that what you want? What I want is to make my own fucking decisions. She threw her phone onto the couch. You keep saying you're not trying to control me, but this is exactly what control looks like. You decided I needed legal protection. You decided to hire lawyers I can't afford. You decided to put my name on documents I never agreed to. You made every single choice without considering that I might want different things. I was protecting you. I don't need your protection. I need your trust. Her voice cracked. I need you to believe I'm capable of handling my own life even when you disagree with my choices. Your choices were letting them win. They were my choices to make. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Min-jae's expression shifted through several emotions: frustration, guilt, stubborn defensiveness, before settling on something that looked almost like despair. I can't watch you suffer, he said quietly. I can't sit here knowing they're destroying you and do nothing. Then you can't be with me. Juliette's voice came out steadier than she felt. Because that's what being with someone means. Respecting their choices even when you hate them. Trusting them to handle their own battles, even when you think you could handle them better. So what? I'm just supposed to let you fail? You're supposed to let me try. And when trying isn't enough? When they destroy your reputation so completely you can never work in Asia again, what then? Then I deal with it. That's my consequence to face, not yours to prevent. Min-jae turned away, pressing both hands against her kitchen counter like he needed physical support. His shoulders were rigid, tattoos dark against the pale skin of his neck. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. My father used to make decisions for me, told me what to study, who to date, how to run my company, said it was for my own good, that he knew better than I did what would make me successful. He looked at her over his shoulder. I hated him for it. Spent 5 years trying to escape his control, and now you're telling me I'm doing the exact same thing to you. The raw honesty of it cracked through Juliette's anger. I know you were trying to help, she said more gently. I know you can't stand watching people you care about get hurt. But Min-jae, you can't save me from every consequence, and you can't make my decisions for me just because you don't like the ones I'm making. So what do we do about the countersuit? You withdraw it tonight, and you apologize for filing it without my consent. And the Han family? I deal with them my way, which might mean losing, which might mean leaving Seoul. But it's my choice to make. Min-jae was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call in rapid Korean. She caught enough words to understand he was talking to his lawyers, instructing them to withdraw the countersuit immediately. When he hung up, he looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're right. I should have asked you first." "Yes, you should have. I don't know how to be in a relationship where I can't fix things." "Then you need to learn. Because I'm not a problem that needs fixing." He crossed the space between them slowly, stopping a few feet away. "Can I touch you?" The question surprised her. "Why are you asking?" "Because I just violated your trust, and I don't know if you want me near you right now." Despite everything, Juliette felt her anger soften slightly. "Come here." Min-jae closed the remaining distance and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. She felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt the tension in his muscles. "I'm terrified of losing you," he admitted against her hair. "I'm terrified of losing myself." "I know." They stood in her small kitchen holding each other while the takeout went cold and Seoul pulsed with life beyond her windows. "We're terrible at this," Juliette said eventually. "At what?" "Being together. We keep hurting each other. Most people do at first. We'll get better." "Will we?" "We have to. Because I can't go back to pretending I don't love you." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "Even when you're furious with me, even when I'm fucking up constantly, even when this whole thing is a disaster, I still choose you. Even if choosing me means letting me make mistakes? Even then." Juliette searched his face for lies and found only exhausted honesty. "The lawsuit withdrawal needs to happen tonight." "It will. And you need to stop making decisions about my life without consulting me first." "I'll try." "Not try. Do." "Okay." Min-jae pressed his forehead against hers. "I'll do better. I promise." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he could actually change the controlling instincts that had been trained into him since birth. But promises were easy. Following through was harder. "One more thing," she said. "Anything." "Who sent me that document?" Min-jae's expression darkened. "I have a guess, but I need to confirm it first." "Tell me." "So Yan, she has contacts in every legal firm in Seoul. Someone must have leaked her a copy of the countersuit paperwork." Juliette processed this. "Why would she send it to me?" "Because she wants to drive a wedge between us. Wants you to see me as controlling and possessive. Wants to prove that her warnings about me were accurate." "They were accurate." "I know." He didn't flinch from the accusation. "I am controlling. I am possessive. I do have a tendency to bulldoze over people when I think I know better. So Yan knows all my worst qualities because she spent 10 years watching them. So she's trying to save me from you. Or destroy what we have because she's bitter about losing me. Could be either." Juliette pulled away entirely, needing space to think. "This is so fucked up." "Yes. We've been together less than 2 weeks, and we've already had a major trust violation." "Yes. Most people would call that a red flag." "Most people would be right." Min-jae leaned against her counter, hands in his pockets, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "But I'm asking you not to give up yet. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be better than my worst instincts. And if you can't, then you leave, and I'll let you go without fighting because that's what you deserve." It was the right answer. The only answer he could have given that would have stopped her from ending things right there. Juliette crossed her arms, studying him. "I'm still angry. I know. And I don't forgive you yet. I know. But I'm not leaving tonight." Something that looked like relief crashed across his face. "Okay. This doesn't mean everything is fine. I know. We need to talk about boundaries and communication and what it actually means to be equals in this relationship. We will. I promise." Min-jae pushed off the counter. "Can I stay? I'll sleep on the couch if you want. I don't want to leave you alone right now." Juliette considered sending him away out of pure spite, but she was exhausted and confused, and despite everything, she didn't want to be alone either. "You can stay, but we're not having sex." "Okay. And you're telling me everything from now on. Every decision that affects me, every move you make with lawyers or your family, or anything else related to this situation. Full transparency." "Yes. And if you violate my trust again, we're done. No second chances." Understood. They ordered new takeout since the first had gone cold, ate in near silence while both processing the evening's revelations. Watched a terrible Korean drama neither of them could focus on, and eventually went to bed in her small room, lying back to back in the darkness while Seoul hummed beyond her windows. Juliette stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, replaying the confrontation over and over. She'd been right to call him out, right to demand better, right to establish boundaries before his controlling instincts consumed whatever they were building. But she was also terrified. Terrified that this was just the beginning of a pattern. Terrified that Min-jae was too damaged by his upbringing to ever truly trust someone else's judgment. Terrified that she was falling in love with a man who would inevitably hurt her in his attempts to protect her. Behind her, Min-jae's breathing had gone deep and steady. She envied his ability to sleep through chaos. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message from the unknown number. He withdrew the lawsuit. But he'll do it again. Men like him always do. You deserve better than someone who thinks love means control. S.Y. So-yeon. Of course it was So-yeon. Juliette stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. She rolled over to face Min-jae's sleeping form, studying the sharp angles of his face in the dim light from her windows. Even asleep, he looked intense, that bone-deep authority that made people instinctively defer to him visible in every line of his body. So-yeon was right that he was controlling, right that he had a tendency to bulldoze over people, right that men like him rarely changed. But she was also bitter and manipulative and clearly invested in destroying whatever Juliette and Min-jae were building. So whose judgment should she trust? So-yeon's warnings based on 10 years of knowing him? Or her own instincts based on 6 months of watching him and 2 weeks of being with him? Juliette reached out and traced one of the tattoos visible above his collar. The curve of a dragon's tail, dark ink stark against pale skin. Min-jae stirred slightly at her touch, but didn't wake. She didn't know the answer. Didn't know if love could survive when one person's instinct to protect collided with the other person's need for autonomy. Didn't know if Min-jae was capable of the kind of growth she needed from him. Didn't know if she was strong enough to keep establishing boundaries with someone whose entire identity was built around being in control. But she knew one thing. She wasn't ready to give up yet. So she pressed herself against his back, wrapped an arm around his waist, and let herself drift into uneasy sleep while Seoul glittered beyond her windows like a city built on secrets that refused to stay buried. The morning brought a new disaster. Juliette woke to her phone ringing incessantly. Jinwoo's name flashed on the screen. She answered groggily, squinting at the bright sunlight flooding her bedroom. "Have you seen the news?" Jinwoo asked without preamble. "What?" "No, I just woke up." "Check your phone. Now." Juliette put him on speaker and opened her news app. The headline made her stomach drop through the floor. Exclusive, secret recordings from Daesung Entertainment reveal Kang Min-jae's obsession with foreign consultant. I'll destroy anyone who gets close to her. Below the headline was an embedded audio player. She hit play with shaking hands. Min-jae's voice came through tinny but unmistakable. "I don't care if she's interested in other men. I'll destroy anyone who gets too close to her. She's mine." Another voice, his assistant maybe, responded in Korean. Then Min-jae again. "I've been watching her for months, learning everything about her, where she goes, who she talks to, what she does when she thinks no one's paying attention. I know her better than she knows herself." The recording cut off. Juliette felt like she'd been punched in the chest. "Juliette?" Jinwoo's voice sounded distant through the speaker. "Are you there?" "Where did this come from?" Someone leaked it to 3 major news outlets simultaneously. They're claiming it's from internal company recordings. The audio forensics look legitimate. Beside her, Min-jae stirred awake. "What's going on?" She handed him her phone without a word. His face went white as he listened to his own voice played back. When the recording ended, he looked like he might be sick. "That's taken completely out of context," he said. "Then give me the context." "It was a conversation with my head of security 6 months ago, right after you joined Daesung. I was concerned about your safety in Seoul. Foreign woman, high-profile consulting role. You were getting attention from some problematic people. I asked security to keep an eye on you. You had me followed. I had you protected. Without my knowledge. Without my consent." Juliette felt hysteria rising in her chest. "You were literally having me surveilled and you're trying to frame it as protection?" It wasn't surveillance. What would you call having someone track my movements and report back to you? Security consultation. That's surveillance, Min-jae. Jinwoo's voice cut through the speaker. I'm still on the line and this is getting awkward. Should I call you back? Yes, Juliette said at the same time Min-jae said no. Calling you back, Jinwoo decided, and the line went dead. Juliette stared at Min-jae, trying to process what she'd just learned. How long were you having me followed? 3 months. 3 months. Until I ended the engagement. After that, I didn't need security reports because I knew where you were. Because we were working together constantly. Yes. Min-jae. She pressed both hands against her face. Do you understand how completely fucked up this is? You were having me surveilled without my knowledge while developing romantic feelings for me. That's not protection. That's stalking. I was trying to keep you safe. I didn't ask you to keep me safe. I didn't even know you were doing it. She stood, needing distance from him. This whole time I thought you were just noticing things about me during normal interactions. But you were literally getting reports about my daily activities, where I went, who I talked to, what I did. That's how you knew I worked late and took my coffee black and looked lonely. Not because you were perceptive, but because you had someone watching me. The truth of it crashed over her in waves. Everything she'd thought was romantic, his attention to detail, his knowledge of her habits, the way he seemed to understand her loneliness, was actually the result of systematic surveillance. He hadn't been falling in love with her through natural interaction. He'd been studying her like a target, gathering intelligence, learning her patterns so he could more effectively pursue her once he decided he wanted her. I need you to leave, she said. Juliette, now, get out of my apartment. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You had me followed for 3 months while you were engaged to someone else and developing an obsession with me. You learned intimate details about my life without my consent. And then you used that information to make me feel seen and understood when really you were just using intelligence you'd gathered through surveillance. Her voice was shaking now, fury and betrayal warring in her chest. So Yeon was right. You don't love me. You're obsessed with me. And there's a huge fucking difference. Min-jae stood slowly, his expression carefully blank. If that's what you believe, then yes, I'll go. That's what the evidence shows. The evidence is a conversation taken out of context and leaked by someone trying to destroy us. The evidence is that you violated my privacy for 3 months and never told me. Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Like someone whose trust was completely violated? Yeah, you're right. That's exactly how I'm reacting. They stared at each other across her small bedroom, the morning sunlight making everything too bright, too exposed. I love you, Min-jae said quietly. Everything I've done, the surveillance, the protection, the controlling behavior, it all comes from the same place. I can't stand the thought of you being hurt. So you hurt me yourself instead. That's not what Yes, it is. You keep saying you love me, but your actions show something completely different. You make decisions without my consent. You violate my privacy. You try to control situations because you can't trust me to handle them myself. Juliette's voice cracked. That's not love. That's possession. Then what do you want from me? I want you to leave. I want you to give me space to figure out if any of this was ever real, or if I just fell for someone who's really good at manipulation. The words landed like blows. She watched them hit, watched Min-jae's expression shift from defensive to something that looked almost like grief. How long? He asked. What? How long do you need? I don't know, maybe forever. He nodded once, sharply, like he was accepting a business decision. Then he gathered his things from her apartment in silence, phone, wallet, the jacket he'd left draped over her chair, and walked to her door. He paused with his hand on the handle. The surveillance stopped months ago, he said, without turning around. The moment I realized I was in love with you, I ended it, because having someone else watch you felt wrong. I wanted to be the one seeing you, the one knowing you, the one you trusted enough to let in. And yet you never told me it existed in the first place. I know. His shoulders dropped. I know I fucked up. I know I keep fucking up. But Juliette, I need you to understand something. Every single thing I've done, right or wrong, helpful or controlling, has been because the thought of losing you terrifies me more than anything else in my life. That's not romantic, that's codependent. Maybe it is. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to love someone without trying to control every variable to keep them safe. I don't know how to trust that things will be okay without micromanaging every outcome. He finally turned to look at her. But I was willing to learn. I am willing to learn, if you give me the chance. Juliette wanted to believe him, wanted to think he was capable of the kind of fundamental change she needed. But she was so tired of making excuses for behavior that kept hurting her. I can't give you that chance right now, she said. I need space to figure out who you actually are versus who I wanted you to be. Min-jae nodded once more. Then he opened her door and left without another word. The moment the door closed behind him, Juliette collapsed onto her bed and finally let herself cry. She cried for the relationship that had felt so real, but might have been built entirely on surveillance and manipulation. Cried for the loneliness she'd felt before him that was now somehow worse with his absence. Cried for the mess they'd made together, and the careers they'd destroyed and the futures they'd sacrificed for something that turned out to be toxic. Her phone rang. Jin Woo calling back. She ignored it. Another call. David from her firm. Ignored. A text from an unknown number. Now you see what I meant. He doesn't know how to love, only possess. You deserve better. S.Y. Juliette threw her phone across the room and pressed her face into her pillow, letting the grief consume her. Outside her window, Seoul pulsed with indifferent life. 10 million people going about their day, completely unaware that Juliette Vale's entire world had just collapsed for the second time in 2 weeks. And this time, she had no idea how to rebuild. Juliette spent 3 days alone in her apartment, watching her life disintegrate in real time. The leaked recording went viral. Every news outlet in Seoul played it on loop, dissecting Min-jae's words with forensic precision. Social media exploded with hot takes, some calling him obsessive and dangerous, others defending him as a CEO, doing due diligence on a high-profile consultant. But the consensus among Seoul's business elite was clear. Both their reputations were now permanently destroyed. Her phone became a weapon, texts from David demanding she issue a statement, emails from potential clients withdrawing interest, voicemails from Korean journalists asking for interviews in broken English, and underneath all of it, 17 missed calls from Min-jae that she refused to answer. On the 4th morning, Jin Woo showed up at her door with coffee and pastries she didn't want. "You look like hell," he said, pushing past her into the apartment. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." "When's the last time you ate?" Juliette couldn't remember. "Yesterday, maybe." Liar. Jinwoo set the food on her counter and started unpacking it with the efficiency of someone who'd dealt with depressed friends before. "Eat. Then we're going to talk about what happens next." "There is no next. It's over." "Nothing's over until you decide it is." "I didn't decide any of this." The words came out sharper than intended. "I didn't decide to get surveilled. I didn't decide to have that recording leaked. I didn't decide to become Seoul's favorite scandal. Everything that's happened to me has been because other people made choices about my life without my consent." Jinwoo handed her a croissant. "Then make a choice now. Take control back." "How?" "Fight, publicly, loudly. Stop letting everyone else write your narrative." Juliette bit into the croissant without tasting it. "I don't have the energy to fight anymore." "Bullshit. You're exhausted and heartbroken and pissed off, but you're not defeated." Jinwoo leaned against her counter, arms crossed. "Look, I'm going to say something you won't want to hear, but someone needs to say it." "Great. Can't wait." Kang Min-jae is a controlling asshole with boundary issues and a savior complex. Everything So Yeon warned you about is true. He violated your privacy, made decisions without your consent, and treated you like a problem to be managed instead of a person to be respected. Jinwoo paused. But he also publicly destroyed his relationship with his family for you. Resigned from billion-dollar positions. Took every consequence Seoul could throw at him without backing down. That doesn't excuse the surveillance or the controlling behavior, but it does mean something. It means he's obsessed. Or it means he actually loves you and just doesn't know how to do it in a healthy way. Jinwoo grabbed his own coffee. "I'm not saying forgive him. I'm saying don't let one fucked up recording erase everything else. The surveillance ended months ago. He could have kept it going, and you never would have known. But he stopped because it felt wrong to him. That doesn't make it okay. No, but it makes him someone capable of growth, and that's worth considering. Juliette set down the croissant, her appetite gone again. Why are you defending him? I'm not defending him. I'm defending you. Because right now you're about to make a decision based on anger and hurt and fear. And those are terrible foundations for major life choices. Jinwoo moved closer. Take a week. Let the initial shock wear off. Then decide whether this relationship is worth saving or if you're better off alone. What if I decide it's not worth it? Then you walk away with a clear conscience knowing you gave it real thought. But if you walk away now, you'll always wonder if you gave up too fast. He stayed for another hour, forcing her to eat and shower and act like a functional human. By the time he left, Juliette felt marginally less like she was drowning. But she still didn't call Min-jae. Instead, she called her mother for the first time in 3 weeks. Baby! Her mom's voice carried that particular blend of joy and concern that only mothers could master. I've been trying to reach you. Are you okay? Not really. Tell me. So Juliette did. She told her everything. The gala, the kiss, the lawsuit, the surveillance, the leaked recording. All the professional disasters and personal betrayals that had accumulated over 2 weeks like an avalanche she couldn't outrun. Her mother listened without interrupting, making occasional sounds of sympathy or outrage in all the right places. When Juliette finally ran out of words, her mother was quiet for a moment. Do you love him? She asked. The question caught Juliette off guard. What? This man who's caused you so much chaos. Do you actually love him, or are you just lonely in Seoul and he paid attention to you? Juliette opened her mouth to answer and realized she didn't know. She thought she loved him, thought the desperate pull between them was real connection rather than just mutual obsession. But how could she trust her own judgment when so much of their relationship had been built on information he'd gathered through surveillance? I don't know, she admitted. Then that's your answer. Her mother's voice was gentle. Real love doesn't make you question whether it's real. It just is. So if you're sitting there wondering if what you felt was love or loneliness or trauma bonding, you already know the truth. What truth? That you need to come home. Not forever. Just long enough to get perspective. To remember who you are when you're not fighting to survive in a country that doesn't want you there. The suggestion hit like a physical blow. Leave Seoul. Leave the career she'd spent 8 months building. Leave the consulting collective she'd just joined. Leave Min-jae without ever resolving what they were to each other. Run. I can't just abandon everything. Why not? What's keeping you there besides pride? Juliette didn't have a good answer to that. She spent the rest of the day staring at her laptop, pretending to work on documentation projects while actually researching flights back to the States. One-way tickets were surprisingly affordable. She could be home in less than 24 hours if she wanted. Her phone buzzed. A text from Min-jae, his first in 3 days. I know you don't want to hear from me, but there's something you need to see. Please. Below the text was a link to a private video file. Juliette almost deleted it. Almost blocked his number entirely. But curiosity, or masochism, she couldn't tell the difference anymore, made her click the link. The video was security footage from what looked like Min-jae's office. Date stamp showed it was from yesterday. So-yeon sat across from his desk, her expression cold and satisfied. The audio quality was poor but audible. So-yeon. The recording did exactly what I needed it to do. She'll never trust you again. Min-jae. You stole private company files and leaked confidential conversations. That's corporate espionage. So-yeon. Prove it. You think anyone will believe you over me? My family has connections in every major media outlet in Seoul. By the time we're done, you'll be known as the obsessive CEO who stalked his own employee. Min-jae. I didn't stalk her. I had security monitor potential threats after she received harassment from So-yeon. Details don't matter. Perception matters. And the perception is that you're dangerous and she's a victim. Which means she'll leave Seoul, you'll be destroyed professionally, and I win. Min-jae. This isn't a competition. So-yeon. Everything is a competition. You chose her over me, over our families, over a decade of history. So yes, I'm making sure you both pay for that choice. The video cut off. Juliette replayed it 3 times, her hands shaking worse with each viewing. So-yeon hadn't just leaked the recording. She'd orchestrated the entire scandal, stolen company files, manipulated the narrative, weaponized Min Jae's worst moment to destroy them both. This wasn't about protecting Juliette from a controlling man. This was revenge dressed up as concern. Her phone rang, Min Jae's name flashing. She answered, "When did you get this footage?" "Yesterday. I've been trying to figure out how to share it without making things worse." "You should have sent it immediately." "I know, but I was terrified you'd think I was manipulating you again, that I'd fake the video or stage the conversation or—" "Min Jae, stop." Juliette pressed her palm against her forehead. "Is the video real?" "Yes." "Did So-yeon actually say those things?" "Yes." "Then why the fuck are you apologizing for showing me?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Because I've spent 3 days accepting that I lost you, that the surveillance was unforgivable, and you were right to walk away. Showing you this video felt like trying to manipulate you into giving me another chance I don't deserve. You're an idiot." "I know. The surveillance was still wrong. You still violated my privacy. You still made decisions without my consent." "I know. But So-yeon is apparently a vindictive nightmare who's been orchestrating this entire disaster from the beginning." "Yes?" Juliette started pacing her apartment, energy flooding back into her exhausted body for the first time in days. "We need to release this video. Are you sure? It'll escalate everything." "Everything is already escalated. She's trying to destroy both of us. The least we can do is expose her for it." Juliette's voice hardened. "Send me the full file. I'm releasing it tonight." "Juliette, don't. Don't try to protect me or manage the situation or make this decision for me. I'm doing this, with or without you." Another pause. Then, "With me. Always with me if you'll let me. I'm still angry at you." "I know. And we still have a lot to work through." "I know. But I'm not letting So-yeon win this." "Then let's fight back together." For the first time in 3 days, Juliette felt something other than despair. She felt rage. Clean, focused, energizing rage at the woman who'd manipulated them both, who'd weaponized Juliette's legitimate concerns about Min Jae's behavior, who'd turned their relationship into a weapon designed to destroy them. "Send me everything you have on her," Juliette said. "Every conversation, every leaked document, every piece of evidence showing she orchestrated this. We're going public with all of it. That'll start a war with her family." "Good. I'm tired of being diplomatic." She heard Min Jae laugh, a rough, relieved sound that made her chest ache. "I've missed you. I've been gone 3 days. Longest 3 days of my life." Juliette wanted to say she'd missed him too, wanted to admit that her apartment had felt wrong without him in it, that she'd reached for her phone a dozen times to text him before remembering they weren't speaking. But the wounds were still too fresh, the hurt too raw. "Send me the files," she said instead. "We'll talk after." "Okay? And Min Jae?" "Yeah? The surveillance thing. We're going to have a very long, very uncomfortable conversation about boundaries and consent and what healthy relationships actually look like." "I know. I'm ready for it." "Are you, though? Because this isn't something you can just apologize for and move past. This is fundamental shit about respect and autonomy and whether I can ever fully trust you again." "I know." His voice was steady. "And I'll do whatever work I need to do. Therapy, couples counseling, whatever it takes. Because losing you for 3 days showed me exactly how empty my life is without you in it." Juliette closed her eyes. "One problem at a time. First we deal with So-yeon, then we figure out if this relationship can survive its own toxicity." "Fair enough." She hung up and immediately called Jin-woo. "I need your help with something slightly illegal." "My favorite kind of help. What are we doing?" "Destroying Han So-yeon's reputation before she destroys ours." Jin-woo laughed. "I'm in. Come to my office and bring your laptop." Juliette grabbed her things and left her apartment for the first time in 3 days, stepping into Seoul's humid evening air with purpose burning in her chest. If So-yeon wanted a war, she'd get one. Jinwoo's startup office was a converted warehouse in Gangnam, all exposed brick and standing desks, and the particular chaos of a company running on caffeine and venture capital. Half a dozen engineers looked up when Juliette entered, then immediately looked away when Jin-woo waved them off. "Conference room," he said, leading her to a glass-walled space in the corner. "Show me what you've got." Juliette pulled up the video on her laptop. Jinwoo watched in silence, his expression getting darker with each second. "Holy shit," he said when it finished. She actually admitted to corporate espionage on camera. And to deliberately sabotaging both our reputations. We need to be smart about releasing this. If we just dump it online, her family's lawyers will have it taken down within an hour and sue us for defamation. "So what do you suggest?" Jinwoo grinned. "We don't release it online. We send it to 3 specific journalists simultaneously, people who hate the Han family's politics and would love to break a story showing their corruption. We give them exclusive access and let them do the verification and fact-checking. That way it's legitimate journalism, not just scandal-mongering. Can you set that up?" "Already texting them." His fingers flew across his phone screen. 2 of them will bite immediately. The 3rd might need convincing, but she owes me a favor. While Jinwoo worked his media contacts, Juliette drafted a statement to accompany the video. She kept it factual, clinical, stripped of emotion. Just the timeline of events from the gala to the leaked recording, with So-yeon's confession providing context for the entire sequence. Min-jae showed up 40 minutes later carrying additional evidence. Email logs showing So-yeon's correspondence with the law firm that drafted the Han family's lawsuit. Financial records proving she'd paid a security consultant to steal the audio file. Text messages between her and several journalists coordinating the media coverage. "Jesus," Jinwoo muttered, reviewing the documents. "She really committed to the revenge plan." "She always does," Min-jae said. "Once So-yeon decides someone has wronged her, she doesn't stop until they're destroyed." He looked at Juliette for the first time since entering the office. She looked back, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes, the careful way he held himself like he was afraid of crowding her space. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi. You look good." "I look like I haven't slept in 3 days." "Still good." Despite everything, Juliette almost smiled. Jinwoo cleared his throat. "I'm going to step out and let you 2 have whatever awkward reunion moment this is. Text me when you're done being weird." He left, closing the glass door behind him. Through the transparent walls, Juliette could see the engineers at their desks, pretending not to watch. Min-jae stayed by the door, maintaining distance. "I didn't think you'd want to see me." "I didn't 3 hours ago. Then I watched So-yeon admit to orchestrating this entire disaster and realized we have bigger problems than your boundary issues." "My boundary issues are still a problem." "Yes, but they're a problem we can address after we stop her from destroying both our lives." Juliette gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. Tell me everything you know about her connections and how we can use this against her." Min-jae sat, relief visible in the way his shoulders dropped. Her family's primary vulnerability is political reputation. Her father is considering a run for Seoul's mayor next year. Any scandal that makes him look weak or corrupt will tank his chances. How does So-yeon's corporate espionage hurt his campaign? Because he's been positioning himself as tough on white-collar crime. If his own daughter committed corporate espionage and he doesn't prosecute, he looks like a hypocrite. If he does prosecute, he looks like he can't control his own family. So we're not just exposing So-yeon, we're destroying her father's political ambitions. Collateral damage. Min-jae's expression was hard. He raised her to believe she could manipulate people without consequences. Maybe losing his campaign will teach him otherwise. They spent the next 2 hours building the case. Jinwoo returned with confirmation that all 3 journalists had agreed to run the story simultaneously, timed for maximum impact during tomorrow morning's news cycle. They coordinated talking points, prepared for the inevitable backlash, and war-gamed every possible response from the Han family's legal team. By midnight, everything was ready. "Last chance to back out," Jinwoo said. "Once these stories go live, there's no pulling them back." Juliette looked at Min-jae. "You sure about this?" "Are you?" "I asked first." "I'm sure." His eyes never left hers. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "Together," she repeated. She hit send on the email to the journalists, copying both Jinwoo and Min-jae. The files uploaded with agonizing slowness. Then the confirmation chimed. Message sent successfully. "Well," Jinwoo said, "guess we'll find out tomorrow if this was brilliant or catastrophic." "Probably both," Juliette said. They left the office as a group, stepping into Seoul's midnight streets. The city glowed around them, indifferent to the bomb they'd just armed. Jin-woo said goodnight and headed toward the subway. Juliette and Min-jae stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to separate. "Can I walk you home?" Min-jae asked. "I can get a taxi." "I know, but I'd like to walk with you anyway." Juliette studied his face in the neon light. "We're not sleeping together tonight." "Okay. And we're not magically fixed just because we're working together against So-yeon." "I know. But you can walk me home." They moved through Gangnam's late-night crowds in silence, past clubs and convenience stores and groups of drunk businessmen stumbling between bars. At one point, Min-jae's hand brushed hers, and she let him take it, their fingers linking naturally despite the unresolved tension between them. "I hate that she was right," Juliette said eventually. "Who?" "So-yeon. About you being controlling and obsessive, about the way you destroy things when you want them. She wasn't completely right. She was right enough." Min-jae was quiet for half a block. "I've been thinking about what you said, about me needing to learn how to love someone without trying to control every variable. And you're right, I don't know how to do that. My father controlled every aspect of my life until I took over the company, and then I just became him, controlling everything around me because that's the only way I know how to feel safe. That's not healthy." "I know. That's why I made an appointment with a therapist. First session is next week." Juliette stopped walking. "You did what?" "Made an appointment with a therapist who specializes in control issues and relationship dynamics. Because if we're going to have any chance of making this work, I need to fix my shit." "You made a therapy appointment?" "Yes." "In the 3 days we weren't speaking?" "Yes." "Why?" Min-jae turned to face her fully. "Because losing you was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Worse than my father's disappointment, worse than the scandal, worse than destroying my family relationships. And I realized that if I didn't do something fundamental to change, I was going to lose you again. And again. Until eventually you'd be gone for good." Juliette's throat tightened. "Therapy isn't a magic fix." "I know, but it's a start. And what if it doesn't work? What if you're just fundamentally too damaged to be in a healthy relationship? Then I'll keep trying until I figure it out. Or until you decide I'm not worth the effort anymore." He stepped closer. "But I need you to know something. Everything So-yeon said about me being obsessive and controlling was true, but she was wrong about one thing." "What?" "That I don't know how to love. Because what I feel for you isn't obsession pretending to be love. It's love that sometimes looks like obsession because I don't know how to express it in healthier ways, but it's still love. Real, terrifying, all-consuming love that makes me want to be better than I am." "That's not fair." "What isn't?" "Saying things like that when I'm trying to stay angry at you." Min-jae's lips twitched. "Sorry." "No, you're not." "You're right. I'm not." They stood on a random street corner in Gangnam while the city moved around them, two people trying to figure out if what they'd built together was worth salvaging, or if they should just let it burn. "If we do this," Juliette said slowly, "if we actually try to make this relationship work, there have to be rules. I'll agree to anything. You don't know what they are yet. Doesn't matter. Tell me. Complete transparency. No more decisions made without consulting me. No more surveillance or protection or keeping me safe without my explicit consent. If you think I'm in danger, you tell me and let me make my own choices about how to handle it." "Agreed." "And therapy. Not just for you, for both of us. Because I have my own issues with trust and independence, and letting people help me. We're both fucked up. We both need to work on it." "Agreed. And if you violate my trust again, if you make one more major decision without my consent, we're done. No second chances, no explanations, no begging for forgiveness. Just done." Min-jae nodded seriously. "Understood. Anything else?" "Yeah. You have to let me succeed or fail on my own terms. That means not interfering with my career, not trying to smooth over problems I'm capable of handling myself, not using your money or influence to make my life easier without asking first. That one's going to be hard for me." "I know, but it's non-negotiable." "Then I'll do it." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in both hands. "Anything else? Tell me you understand what you did wrong, not just that the surveillance happened, but why it was so damaging. Min-jae was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I violated your privacy and autonomy because I decided my need to keep you safe was more important than your right to make your own choices. I treated you like a problem to be managed instead of a person with agency. And I used information gathered without your consent to manipulate you into feeling seen and understood when really I was just performing intimacy based on surveillance data. Each word landed with precision, showing he'd actually thought about this rather than just crafting an apology designed to placate her. That's exactly what you did, Juliette said quietly. I know, and I'm sorry. Not because saying sorry will fix it, but because I genuinely understand how badly I fucked up and how much damage I caused. Sorry doesn't undo the harm. No, but it's the starting point for doing better. Juliette searched his face in the neon light, looking for lies or manipulation or the controlling tendencies she knew were baked into his personality. She found exhaustion and honesty and something that looked almost like hope. We're going to be a disaster together, she said. Probably. We're going to hurt each other. Definitely. This might not work. I know. So why are we even trying? Min-jae's thumb traced her cheekbone. Because 3 days without you was worse than every mistake we've made combined. Because fighting with you is better than being comfortable with anyone else. Because you make me want to be better than I am, and that's worth all the therapy and hard conversations and uncomfortable growth. That's still not healthy. Maybe not, but it's honest. Juliette closed her eyes, feeling his hands warm against her face, smelling his cologne that she'd missed more than she wanted to admit. She thought about her mother's advice to come home, thought about Jinwoo's warning that this relationship might be too damaged to save, thought about all the logical reasons she should walk away from someone whose first instinct was control rather than trust. And then she thought about the way Min-jae had looked at her in his boardroom 6 months ago, like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. The way he defended her proposals to his board even when they contradicted his own strategy. The way he destroyed his entire life for the chance to be with her openly. The surveillance was wrong. The controlling behavior was wrong. The violation of her autonomy was wrong. But the love underneath all of it might actually be real. Kiss me, she said. Min-jae didn't hesitate. He kissed her like a man who'd been drowning for 3 days and just found oxygen, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Juliette kissed him back with equal desperation, months of tension and days of separation collapsing into heated proximity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Min-jae pressed his forehead against hers. Come home with me, he said. Your place or mine? Whichever one means I get to wake up next to you. Mine. It's closer. They walked the remaining blocks to her apartment with linked hands, not speaking, just existing in the tentative peace of two people who'd decided to keep fighting for something that probably shouldn't work, but somehow did anyway. Juliette unlocked her door and Min-jae followed her inside, and for the first time in 3 days, her apartment felt less like a cage and more like a home. Ground rules, she said, dropping her bag by the door. We're not having sex tonight. Okay. I'm still processing everything, still angry, still hurt. I know, but I want you to stay anyway. I will. They ended up on her couch talking until 3 in the morning. Min-jae told her about the therapy appointment, about the specific things he wanted to work on, about the childhood that had trained him to equate control with safety. Juliette told him about the racism she'd endured in Seoul, about the loneliness she'd been hiding, about her fear of losing herself in a relationship with someone whose personality was so much stronger than hers. You're not weak, Min-jae said. You're the strongest person I know. Then why does being with you make me feel so powerless? Because I keep trying to protect you instead of trusting you to protect yourself. But I'm going to work on that. I promise. They eventually migrated to her bed, fully clothed, lying face to face in the darkness. Min-jae's hand found hers under the covers, their fingers linking. What happens tomorrow? Juliette asked. The stories break. Soyeon's world explodes. Her family probably threatens legal action. Seoul loses its mind again. Looking forward to it already. We'll survive it. How can you be sure? Because we survived the last 3 days, and those were worse than anything So Yeon can throw at us. Juliette wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that releasing the video would shift public perception, that exposing So Yeon's manipulation would somehow redeem them both in Seoul's eyes. But she'd spent 8 months learning how Seoul operated, and she knew that truth didn't always matter as much as power and perception and political connections. Min-jae? Yeah? If this doesn't work, if releasing the video just makes everything worse, will you regret it? No. Why not? Because at least we fought back. At least we didn't just roll over and let her destroy us. He squeezed her hand. I'm done letting other people write my story, and I think you are too. He was right. Juliette had spent 8 months in Seoul being careful, being diplomatic, being the perfect consultant who never caused problems. And where had it gotten her? Sued by a powerful family, professionally isolated, publicly humiliated. So maybe it was time to stop being careful. Maybe it was time to burn everything down and see what they could build from the ashes. Okay, she said into the darkness. Let's go to war. The morning broke with headlines that set Seoul on fire. Exclusive. Han So-yeon admits to corporate espionage in secret, recording. Leaked video shows former fiancé. Orchestrated scandal to destroy. Kang Min-jae. Political fallout. Han family's mayoral ambitions in jeopardy. After daughter's confession, Juliette's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. and didn't stop. David, the senior partners, Jin-woo, numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them, lying in bed next to Min-jae, watching the story spread across social media like wildfire. The video had been viewed 2 million times in the first 3 hours. Korean Twitter exploded with hot takes. Some defending So-yeon as a scorned woman driven to extremes. Others condemning her for corporate espionage and manipulating public opinion. But the dominant narrative had shifted dramatically, from foreign consultant ruins engagement to bitter ex-fiancé orchestrates revenge plot. It's working, Min-jae said, scrolling through his own phone. The tide is turning. For now. Wait until her family's lawyers respond. The response came at 9 a.m., a press conference hastily arranged at one of Seoul's most prestigious hotels. Han So-yeon stood flanked by both her parents and 3 lawyers, looking composed and defiant. Juliette and Min-jae watched the live stream from her couch. The video released by Mr. Kang is taken entirely out of context, So-yeon said in perfect English, clearly performing for international media. I was speaking hypothetically about public perception, not admitting to any illegal activity. The recording itself was obtained without my consent, which makes it inadmissible as evidence of wrongdoing. Bullshit, Juliette muttered. One of So-yeon's lawyers stepped forward. We are pursuing legal action against both Mr. Kang and Miss Vale for defamation, invasion of privacy, and corporate espionage. The evidence against them is substantial, and we're confident in our case. The press conference continued with more denials, more threats, more careful legal language designed to muddy the waters. But something was off. Juliette watched So-yeon's eyes during the entire presentation, watched the way her composure cracked slightly when a journalist asked about the specific timeline of events, watched the micro-expression of panic when another journalist brought up her father's mayoral campaign. She's scared, Juliette said. Of what? Of being caught. Of her father's political career being destroyed. Of losing control of the narrative. Juliette sat forward, adrenaline flooding her system. We have her on the defensive. We need to press harder. How? We don't respond to the press conference. We release more evidence. Show that the video wasn't taken out of context. Prove she actually committed the crime she's denying. I already gave you everything I have. Then we get more. Juliette grabbed her phone and called Jin-woo. He answered immediately. Did you watch the press conference? Yeah, she's lying through her teeth. Can your engineers trace where the leaked recording originally came from? Already did that last night. Want to guess whose personal cloud storage account it was uploaded to? So-yeon's. Bingo. I'll send you the technical documentation. It's complicated, but it proves she had access to the file before it went public. Send it to those same 3 journalists. Let them run follow-up stories. On it! Juliette hung up and turned to Min-jae. What else do we have on her? Anything she might have said to you privately that contradicts the press conference? Text messages, emails, but most of it would require subpoena to access legally. Fuck legal. We're already at war. Give me anything that proves she orchestrated this deliberately. Min-jae hesitated. There's one thing, but using it would destroy her completely. Good. Juliette, Min-jae? She tried to destroy us. She weaponized my legitimate concerns about your behavior. She sabotaged both our careers. She committed actual crimes and is now lying about it in front of international media. Juliette's voice was hard. I'm done being the bigger person. Give me whatever you have. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and opened an email chain. 3 months ago, right after I ended the engagement, So-yeon sent me a series of messages, threatening to ruin me if I didn't come back to her, explicitly outlining how she'd use her family's connections to destroy my reputation and anyone I got involved with. That's blackmail. And proof of premeditation. If we release these, it shows she planned this entire revenge plot from the moment I left her. Do it. She'll be prosecuted. Her father's campaign will be over. Her family will never forgive me. Do it. Min-jae looked at her for another second. Then he forwarded the emails to the 3 journalists with a simple message. Additional evidence of premeditation. Use at your discretion. Done, he said. Juliette felt something fierce and feral rise in her chest. This was what power felt like. Not the careful diplomacy she'd practiced for 8 months, but the raw, brutal satisfaction of fighting back against people who tried to destroy her. What now? Min-jae asked. Now we wait for her world to collapse. The collapse came faster than expected. By noon, all 3 journalists had published follow-up pieces with the new evidence. The emails showed So-yeon explicitly threatening to destroy anyone who tries to replace me, and outlining specific strategies for manipulating public opinion. Combined with the technical documentation proving she'd accessed the leaked recording, the case against her became undeniable. Korean social media turned on her instantly. The same people who defended her that morning now called her vindictive, manipulative, dangerous. Her father issued a terse statement withdrawing from the mayoral race to focus on family matters. 2 major companies announced they were severing business relationships with the Han family pending investigations into ethical violations. It was carnage, and Juliette watched it all with cold satisfaction. You okay? Min-jae asked. I don't know. Should I feel guilty? For what? For enjoying this. For wanting her to suffer. She tried to destroy both of us. Feeling satisfaction when she fails doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't it, though? Juliette set down her phone. A week ago, I was trying to be professional and diplomatic. Now I'm actively participating in someone's public destruction. When did I become this person? When you decided to stop letting other people walk all over you. Min-jae moved closer. You're not being cruel. You're being strategic. There's a difference. Maybe, or maybe Seoul had finally broken something in her that used to believe in taking the high road. Her phone rang. David's name flashing. She answered on speaker. Before you say anything, yes, I released the evidence, yes, it was deliberate, and no, I'm not apologizing for it. I'm not asking you to apologize. David's voice was carefully neutral. The senior partners want to meet with you, in person, tomorrow morning. To fire me? To discuss your return to active client assignments. Juliette's breath caught. What? The narrative has shifted. You're no longer the consultant with questionable ethics. You're the victim who fought back against corruption. Several potential clients have specifically requested to work with you because of how you handled this situation. You're serious? Completely. The firm wants you back on full status immediately. David paused. Though personally, I think you should tell us to fuck off and build your own practice. You're too good for us anyway. The call ended with details about tomorrow's meeting. Juliette sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of 12 hours, she'd gone from professionally destroyed to actively courted, all because she'd stopped being diplomatic and started fighting back. Congratulations, Min-jae said. I don't know if I want to go back. Then don't. Join Jin Woo's collective. Start your own firm. Do whatever feels right. What feels right is burning the entire system down. Min-jae laughed. That's also an option. They spent the rest of the day fielding calls and messages while Seoul's business community processed the scandal. Some people reached out with support, others with barely concealed schadenfreude at the Han family's downfall, a few with genuine concern about whether Juliette and Min-jae were okay. By evening, they were both exhausted. I need air, Juliette said. Want to walk? They left her apartment and wandered through Itaewon's evening crowds, past restaurants and bars, and groups of expats enjoying Friday night. At one point, they passed a newspaper stand displaying headlines about the scandal in both Korean and English. Juliette stopped to stare at her own name printed in 12-point font. "Surreal," she said. "Which part?" "All of it. 2 weeks ago, I was a consultant trying to keep my head down and do good work. Now I'm a public figure involved in one of Seoul's biggest corporate scandals. Regret it?" "Parts of it, not all of it." She looked at him. "Not you. Even with the surveillance and the controlling behavior and the multiple trust violations? Even with all that? Because you're also the person who made me feel less alone in Seoul. Who saw me as more than just a foreign consultant, who was willing to blow up your entire life just to be with me." She squeezed his hand. "You're a disaster, but you're my disaster. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Your bar is concerningly low." They walked for another hour, talking through what came next. Juliette's meeting with the firm. Min Jae's therapy appointment. The potential fallout from So-yeon's family once the initial shock wore off. The long, difficult process of building a relationship that wasn't based on obsession and crisis. "I'm scared," Juliette admitted as they headed back toward her apartment. "Of what?" "That once things settle down, once we're not fighting for survival anymore, we'll realize we don't actually work together, that all this intensity was just crisis bonding and trauma response. Then we'll figure that out too." Min Jae stopped walking, pulling her to face him under a streetlight. "I'm not naive enough to think this will be easy. We're both damaged people with terrible relationship patterns trying to build something healthy, but I'd rather try and fail with you than succeed with anyone else." "That's still not healthy." "I know. We'll work on it. We'll work on—" Juliette kissed him because she didn't have better words. Because despite every logical reason this shouldn't work, she wanted it to anyway. Because burning down Seoul's elite together had been more satisfying than 8 months of being professional and diplomatic. When they got back to her apartment, Min Jae's phone was ringing. He glanced at the screen and his expression went dark. "Who is it?" Juliette asked. "My mother." "You should probably answer that." "Probably." He stared at the phone like it was a weapon. Then he answered in Korean, his voice carefully neutral. Juliette couldn't understand most of the conversation, but she caught enough tone and body language to know it wasn't going well. Min Jae's shoulders got tighter with each passing minute. His jaw clenched, his free hand curled into a fist. When he finally hung up, he looked exhausted. "What did she want?" "To inform me that I'm officially disowned. No inheritance, no family business connections, no support of any kind." His voice was flat. "She said I chose disgrace over duty, and the family wants nothing to do with me anymore." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I knew this was coming the moment I ended the engagement." He sat down hard on her couch. "Doesn't make it hurt less, though." Juliette sat beside him, taking his hand. "You just lost your entire family for me." "No. I lost a family that never actually saw me as anything other than an investment to be managed. There's a difference." "Still, that's a huge sacrifice." "It was necessary." Min Jae looked at her. "And honestly, losing them hurts less than losing you did. So no, I don't regret it." They sat in silence for a moment, processing the weight of what he'd just given up. "We're going to build something better," Juliette said finally. "A life that's actually ours, not dictated by families or social expectations or what Seoul's elite think we should be. Promise?" "Promise." Min Jae pulled her against his chest, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. Juliette wrapped her arms around him and held on just as tightly. Two people who'd burned down their entire world and were now facing the terrifying task of building something new from the ashes. Outside her window, Seoul glowed with indifferent life. 10 million people going about their evening completely unaware that Juliette Vale and Kang Min-jae had just won a battle, but were about to face an even bigger war. Because the Han family didn't accept defeat gracefully, and neither did Seoul's elite. The real fight was only beginning. The Han family's counterattack came exactly 3 days after the scandal broke. Not through lawyers or press conferences this time. Through something far more insidious. A coordinated campaign targeting every professional relationship Juliette had built in Seoul. She discovered it during her meeting with the firm's senior partners. David sat across the conference table looking uncomfortable, while two other partners avoided eye contact entirely. Several of our Korean clients have expressed concerns, David said carefully, about your involvement with the Kang situation. The Kang situation where we exposed corporate espionage and blackmail? They're characterizing it differently, as a foreign consultant who became romantically entangled with a client, violated professional ethics, and then weaponized private business communications for personal vendettas. Juliette's blood went cold. That's a complete distortion of what actually happened. Doesn't matter. 3 major clients have threatened to pull their accounts if we continue employing you. 2 others are reviewing their options. The partners are concerned about the financial exposure. So you're firing me after all. We're suggesting, one of the other partners interjected smoothly, that you take an extended leave of absence. Let things cool down. Perhaps relocate to one of our other offices, Singapore, Hong Kong, even back to New York. Translation: disappear quietly so the firm could distance itself from the controversy. And if I refuse, then we'll have no choice but to formally terminate your contract for ethical violations. David at least had the decency to look guilty. I'm sorry, Juliette, I fought for you, but the pressure from Korean clients is too intense. She left the meeting 30 minutes later, officially on voluntary leave with a severance package that felt like blood money. The consulting collective Jin Woo had offered suddenly looked less like an opportunity and more like her only remaining option in Seoul. She called Min Jae from a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, hands shaking around her cup. They pushed me out, she said when he answered. Who? The firm. Officially it's voluntary leave, but we both know what it actually is. She watched business people stream past on the sidewalk, all of them moving with purpose while her own career disintegrated. The Han family got to every major Korean client, turned the narrative back around. Now I'm the unethical consultant who seduced a CEO and weaponized private communications. I'll issue a statement, clarify what actually happened. It won't matter. You're already disowned by your family. You have no credibility with the people they're targeting. Juliette closed her eyes. We expose So-yeon's crimes, but her family is powerful enough to create new narratives anyway. Then we fight back harder. With what? I just lost my job. You've lost your family connections. We released every piece of evidence we had, and it still wasn't enough to actually destroy them. The exhaustion in her voice surprised her. Maybe we should just accept that Seoul isn't going to let us win this. So what, you're giving up? I'm being realistic about our options. Min Jae was quiet for a long moment. Where are you? Coffee shop in Gangnam. Why? Stay there. I'm coming to you. He arrived 20 minutes later, looking like he'd left important meetings without explanation. Sat across from her in the window booth and ordered nothing, just studied her face with that unsettling intensity she'd learned meant he was processing something significant. Tell me what you're thinking, he said. That I should probably take my mother's advice and go home. That 8 months in Seoul has cost me more than I've gained. That maybe some battles aren't worth fighting. Do you believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. Juliette stared at her coffee. I came to Seoul to build my career. To prove I could succeed in one of the most difficult markets in the world. And instead, I fell in love with a client, became a public scandal, and got pushed out of my firm anyway. So what was the point of any of it? The point, Min Jae said carefully, is that you survived. You fought back against people trying to destroy you. You refused to be silenced or intimidated. That's not failure. It feels like failure, because you're measuring success by Seoul's standards. By whether the business elite accept you, whether traditional firms employ you, whether you can succeed inside a system designed to exclude you. He reached across the table and took her hand. But what if you measure success differently? By whether you built something authentic, whether you stayed true to yourself, whether you found people worth fighting for. That's a nice sentiment. Doesn't pay my bills. No. But Jin Woo's collective does. And your severance package gives you runway to build your own practice. And I have capital I can invest if you want to go independent entirely. I told you I don't want your money. It wouldn't be charity. It would be investment in a consulting firm I believe will be successful. Min Jae's expression was serious. You're brilliant, Juliette. The only reason Seoul's traditional firms are pushing you out is because you threaten their way of operating. But there are plenty of companies, especially international ones expanding into Asia, who'd kill to work with a consultant who actually understands cross-cultural complexity. She wanted to believe him. wanted to think that losing her firm job was actually liberation rather than failure. But the exhaustion ran too deep, the disappointment too sharp. "I need time to think," she said. "How much time?" "I don't know. A few days, maybe?" Min-jae nodded slowly. "Okay. Take whatever time you need. But Juliette, don't make this decision from a place of defeat. Make it from a place of power." "I don't feel very powerful right now." "I know, but you are." He stood, leaning down to press a kiss to her forehead. "You're the woman who survived 8 months in Seoul's corporate warfare, who fought back against one of Korea's most powerful families, who made me want to be better than I was. That's power. Don't forget it." He left her in the coffee shop with those words echoing in her mind, trying to decide if she believed them or if they were just pretty lies designed to make her feel better about losing. She spent the next 2 days alone in her apartment, oscillating between anger and resignation. Her mother called twice, offering to book her a flight home. Jin Woo texted with concrete details about the collective: salary structure, client pipeline, operational timeline. David sent a formal letter confirming her leave of absence with barely concealed relief that she'd accepted it quietly. And Min-jae gave her space, sending only one text each day. "Still here when you're ready." On the third morning, Juliette woke up to news that changed everything. Breaking. Han family under investigation for corporate fraud and political corruption. She opened the article with shaking hands. Prosecutors had launched a formal investigation into the Han family's business practices following anonymous tips about financial irregularities. The investigation had expanded to include So-yeon's corporate espionage, her father's political financing, and a web of corruption that apparently went far deeper than anyone had realized. Someone had given prosecutors a comprehensive dossier documenting years of illegal activity. Juliette called Min-jae immediately. "Did you do this?" "Do what?" "The investigation, the anonymous tips, the dossier." "I might have had some information about their business practices that I felt obligated to share with relevant authorities." Min-jae: "What?" "They committed crimes. I provided evidence. That's civic duty, not revenge." "When did you do this?" 3 days ago, right after you told me the firm pushed you out." His voice was matter of fact. "I realized we'd been playing defense the entire time, reacting to their attacks, trying to protect ourselves, constantly on the back foot, so I decided to go on offense instead. By destroying their entire family. By ensuring they face consequences for their actual crimes. There's a difference." Juliette sat down hard on her couch, processing this. "You could have told me." "I could have. But you were already feeling defeated, and I didn't want you making decisions based on revenge. I wanted you to choose your own path independent of what happened to them." "That's manipulative." "Yes, I'm working on that in therapy." Despite everything, Juliette almost laughed. "You're impossible." "I know, but I'm your impossible." A pause. "Have you made any decisions about what comes next?" "Not yet. But this changes things." "How?" "Because now it's not about whether Seoul's elite will let me succeed. It's about whether I want to stay in a city that fought me this hard." She stared out of her window at the skyline that had felt so foreign 8 months ago. "I need to figure out if Seoul is where I actually want to build my life, or if I'm just staying out of stubbornness." "Fair enough. Let me know when you decide." The call ended and Juliette spent the rest of the morning watching news coverage of the Han family investigation. So-yeon had been brought in for questioning. Her father's campaign was officially dead. Their business empire was hemorrhaging value as investors fled. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt empty. That evening, Juliette finally called her mother back. "I've been thinking about your advice," she said, "about coming home." "And I think you're right that I need perspective, but I don't think running away gives me that. I think it just means Seoul wins by default." "Baby, you don't have anything left to prove." "Maybe not to anyone else, but to myself?" Juliette looked around her sparse apartment, at the life she'd built from nothing in a city that had resisted her every step of the way. "I came to Seoul to prove I could succeed anywhere, and I'm not ready to admit defeat just because it got hard." "It's more than hard. You lost your job." "I lost a job at a firm that didn't deserve me anyway. But I didn't lose my skills or my experience or my ability to build something new. She felt certainty settling in her chest for the first time in days. I'm staying, Mom. At least for a while longer. I need to know if I can actually build something here on my own terms. Her mother was quiet for a moment. You sound different. Different how? Stronger. Like you finally stopped trying to prove yourself to people who don't matter and started focusing on what you actually want. Maybe that's what this whole disaster was for, to burn away all the parts of myself I built to please other people. That's very philosophical for someone who just lost her job. Juliette laughed. Blame Seoul. This city either breaks you or makes you philosophical about survival. They talked for another hour about practical things. Money, visa status, backup plans if the consulting collective didn't work out. But underneath the logistics, Juliette felt something shift inside her. A recognition that the woman who'd arrived in Seoul 8 months ago wouldn't have survived what she'd just endured. That woman had been too afraid of failure, too invested in external validation, too convinced that success meant fitting into systems that were never designed to include her. This version of herself, bruised and exhausted but still standing, was harder, sharper, more willing to burn down structures that tried to contain her. Maybe that was worth the cost after all. She called Jin Woo next. I'm in. The consulting collective. Whatever you need from me, I'll do it. Yeah, you're sure? Completely. When do we start? Next week. I'll send over the contract details tomorrow. She heard the smile in his voice. Welcome to the resistance, Juliette. The resistance? Against Seoul's old guard bullshit. Someone has to start pushing back, and it might as well be us. She liked the sound of that. Finally, she texted Min Jae. Come over. We need to talk. He arrived 30 minutes later looking cautious, like he wasn't sure whether she was about to end things or start them again. Juliette let him in and they stood in her small entryway, the space feeling charged with unspoken tension. I'm staying in Seoul, she said without preamble. Relief crashed across his face. Yeah? Yeah, but not for you. For me. Because I need to prove to myself that I can build something here that's actually mine. Okay. Which means we need to have a very serious conversation about what this relationship actually is and whether it can survive outside of crisis mode. Min Jae nodded. I know, I've been thinking about that too. They moved to her couch, sitting facing each other with careful space between them. Outside, Seoul's evening lights were starting to glow, the city transforming into the neon spectacle that had first intimidated her 8 months ago. I love you, Juliette said. I need you to know that first. Whatever else happens in this conversation, that part is real. I love you too, but love isn't enough. Not when we have fundamental incompatibilities in how we operate. She took a breath. You're a fixer. When you see problems, your instinct is to solve them, control them, manage them. And I'm someone who needs autonomy to function, who can't be in a relationship where my partner is constantly trying to protect me from consequences I'm capable of handling myself. I know. That's why I'm in therapy. Therapy is good, but it's also slow. Growth is slow. And I need to know whether you're actually capable of the kind of fundamental change required for us to work long term. Min Jae was quiet, choosing his words carefully. I don't know if I am. I want to be. I'm committed to trying, but I've spent 32 years operating one way, and I can't promise I'll magically become different just because I want to. That's honest. It's all I have right now. He shifted closer. But I can promise to keep trying, to catch myself when I'm being controlling, to ask instead of assuming, to trust you to handle your own life even when every instinct tells me to intervene. And when you fail? Because you will fail sometimes. Then I apologize. We talk about it, and I do better next time. He took her hand. I'm not asking you to accept me as I am. I'm asking you to accept that I'm actively trying to become better. Juliette studied his face, the exhaustion in his eyes, the tattoos that made him look dangerous, the careful way he held himself like he was afraid of crowding her space. This was the man who'd destroyed his family relationships for her, who'd exposed corporate corruption to protect her, who was willing to spend years in therapy unlearning toxic patterns just for a chance at building something healthy together. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, I'll accept that. But with conditions. Anything. We do couples therapy. Not just you individually, both of us working on this together. Agreed. And we establish concrete boundaries around decision-making. Major choices that affect both of us get discussed first. No more surprises, no more unilateral action. Agreed. And we acknowledge that this might not work, that we might try our hardest and still be too damaged to build something healthy. And if that happens, we walk away with love instead of destroying each other. Min-jae's expression tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. And one more thing. What? You have to trust me. Actually trust me. Not just say you trust me while secretly trying to control outcomes, but real trust that lets me succeed or fail on my own terms. That's the hardest one. I know, but it's non-negotiable. Min-jae pulled her closer, wrapping both arms around her and pressing his face into her hair. She felt him trembling slightly, felt the way he held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. I'll try, he said against her temple. I promise I'll try. That's all I'm asking. They sat like that for a long time, two people who'd burned down their entire world and were now trying to figure out how to build something sustainable from the ashes. It wasn't romantic, wasn't the dramatic confession or grand gesture that movies made love look like. It was just two damaged people making a conscious choice to keep trying despite every reason they shouldn't. What happens now? Min-jae asked eventually. Now we start over, clean slate. Build this relationship the right way instead of the crisis-fueled disaster it's been so far. How do we do that? I have no idea, but we'll figure it out. Juliette pulled back to look at him. Starting with an actual date. Not a gala, not a professional event, just dinner where we actually learn about each other without surveillance or scandal or any of the chaos that's defined us so far. I can do that. Good. Saturday night, you pick the restaurant. Any preferences? Somewhere that doesn't care about our scandal, preferably somewhere in Itaewon where everyone's too focused on their own drama to notice ours. Min-jae smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. I know a place. They spent the rest of the evening planning their lives like normal people facing normal problems. Juliette walked him through her plans for the consulting collective. Min-jae explained the restructuring happening at his company now that family interference was gone. They talked about therapy schedules and boundary setting and what healthy communication actually looked like when neither of them had good models for it. It felt almost boring compared to the chaos of the previous 2 weeks. Juliette loved it. When Min-jae finally left around midnight, he paused at her door the same way he had weeks ago when everything first detonated. I know I've said this before, he told her, but I need you to really hear it this time. I love you. Not the idea of you, not the challenge you represent, not the way you make me feel. I love the actual person you are, messy and complicated and fierce and terrified, and I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that to you. I believe you. Yeah? Yeah. Finally. He kissed her slowly, gently, without the desperate intensity that had characterized their previous encounters. This felt different, like a promise instead of a claim, like partnership instead of possession. When he left, Juliette stood in her doorway watching him disappear down the hallway, and for the first time since arriving in Seoul, her apartment didn't feel like a cage. It felt like home. The Han family investigation dominated headlines for the next 3 weeks. Prosecutors uncovered decades of financial fraud, political bribery, and corporate manipulation. So Yeon was formally charged with corporate espionage and blackmail. Her father resigned from every corporate board he'd held. Their business empire collapsed as partners fled and investigators seized assets. It was comprehensive destruction, and while Juliette had been the catalyst for the investigation, she found herself feeling less satisfaction than she'd expected. The Han family were criminals who deserved consequences, but watching their world disintegrate still felt sad in a way she couldn't quite articulate. That's called empathy, her therapist said during their second session. You can acknowledge that someone harmed you while still recognizing their humanity. Juliette had started seeing a therapist the same week she joined the consulting collective. Not couples therapy with Min-jae yet, but individual work to address her own issues with control, trust, and the way she'd been performing strength for so long she'd forgotten how to actually be vulnerable. It was uncomfortable as hell, but necessary. The consulting collective launched officially in early spring, 2 months after the scandal that had nearly destroyed her. Juliette took on 3 clients immediately. International companies expanding into Asia who wanted consultants with real cross-cultural experience rather than Seoul insiders who'd maintain the status quo. The work was challenging, fulfilling, and entirely hers. She stopped checking her old firm's social media, stopped obsessing over what Seoul's elite thought of her, stopped measuring success by whether she'd been accepted into systems designed to exclude her. Instead, she measured it by whether she was building something authentic, whether she was staying true to herself, whether she was finding people worth fighting for. The answer to all three was yes. Min-jae kept his promises. He called before making major decisions, asked instead of assuming, caught himself when he was being controlling, and apologized when he failed. They started couples therapy 6 weeks after the reconciliation, showing up every Thursday evening to a quiet office in Gangnam where a patient therapist helped them unlearn toxic patterns and build healthier ones. It was slow work, frustrating work that required both of them to be more vulnerable than they'd ever been comfortable with. But it was working. 3 months after everything exploded, they had their first real fight that didn't end in threats or storming out. They argued about Min-jae making a financial decision without consulting her first, old patterns resurfacing under stress. But instead of the screaming match it would have been before, they took a break, processed separately, and came back together to actually talk through the problem. "I fucked up," Min-jae admitted. "I was anxious about the timeline and made a unilateral call instead of waiting to discuss it with you first." "You did, but you also caught yourself and apologized without me having to extract it from you. That's growth. Doesn't make the fuck up okay. No, but it makes you someone capable of learning, and that's what matters." They were learning together how to be partners instead of adversaries, how to support without controlling, how to love without possession. It wasn't perfect, wasn't the fairy tale romance she'd imagined as a younger woman, but it was real in ways those fantasies had never been. And real was better. 6 months after the scandal, Juliette got a call from an unexpected source. "Miss Vale?" The voice was female, professional, speaking Korean accented English. "This is Park Min-jung, Mr. Kang's mother." Juliette's hand tightened on her phone. "Mrs. Kang, I'm surprised to hear from you." "I imagine you are, given that I disowned my son for choosing you over his family obligations." "That's one way to phrase it." A long pause. Then, "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. I'm calling to see if you would meet with me. In person. At your convenience." Juliette's first instinct was to refuse. Min-jae's mother had made her position clear 6 months ago. There was no reason to open that wound again, but something in the woman's voice, vulnerability maybe, or genuine regret, made her hesitate. "Why?" she asked. "Because my son is happier than I have ever seen him. Because the investigation into the Han family revealed that they manipulated our family as well, for years. Because I'm an old woman who realizes she prioritized pride over love and would like to repair that mistake if possible." "Does Min-jae know you're calling?" "No, this is my choice, my amends to make." Juliette thought about it for a long moment. "I'll meet with you, but I'm bringing Min-jae." "Of course. I would not expect otherwise." They met 3 days later at a traditional tea house in Bukchon, neutral territory that belonged to neither family nor scandal. Min-jae sat beside Juliette, his posture rigid, while his mother sat across from them looking smaller than Juliette had imagined. "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Kang said in careful English. She looked at her son. "You look well." "I am well," Min-jae said, his voice neutral. "I am glad." She folded her hands on the table. "I asked you here because I owe you both an apology. I allowed pride and social expectations to dictate my response to your relationship. I condemned you without knowing the full truth. I disowned my son for choosing love over obligation when I should have celebrated his courage." Min-jae's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Mrs. Kang turned to Juliette. "And I owe you specific apology, Miss Vale. I allowed the Han family to poison my perception of you. I believed their narrative that you were an opportunist using my son for advancement, when the truth was you were a brilliant woman who made him want to be better than he was. I am sorry for that misjudgment." "Thank you," Juliette said carefully. "But I'm not the one you need to apologize to most." "I know." Mrs. Kang looked at her son again, and Juliette saw real pain in her eyes. "Min-jae, I am sorry. For the disowning, for the harsh words, for prioritizing family reputation over your happiness, for not trusting that you were capable of making your own choices about your life. You deserved better from me, and I failed you." Min-jae was quiet for so long that Juliette wondered if he'd respond at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Do you actually believe that? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear because the scandal has died down?" "I believe it. The investigation into the Han family revealed many things, including how they manipulated our family's business dealings for years. How So-yeon's father used our engagement to gain political leverage. How I was too blinded by traditional expectations to see I was enabling corruption." Mrs. Kang's voice wavered slightly. "I spent 6 months watching my son build a life without me, watching him become happier, more authentic, more himself, and I realized that everything I thought I was protecting, family honor, social standing, traditional values, meant nothing compared to losing him." "What do you want from us?" Min-jae asked. "A chance to rebuild relationship, slowly, on your terms." She looked at Juliette. "Both of you. I am not asking to be welcomed back immediately. I am asking for the opportunity to prove I have learned from my mistakes." Juliette looked at Min-jae, trying to read his expression. He was closed off, guarded, the way he got when processing deep emotion. "This is your choice," she said quietly. "Whatever you decide, I'll support." Min-jae studied his mother for a long moment. "I need time to think about it." "Of course. Take whatever time you need." Mrs. Kang stood, gathering her things. "I am staying at the Shilla Hotel if you wish to contact me. Otherwise, I will respect your decision either way." She left with a formal bow, and Juliette and Min-jae sat in the tea house watching Seoul's afternoon light filter through traditional windows. "Are you okay?" Juliette asked. "I don't know. 6 months ago, I was ready to never speak to her again. Now she's apologizing, and I don't know if I can trust it." "You don't have to decide today." "I know." He turned to look at her. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do whatever feels right for you. Not what I want, not what she wants, what you need." "That's not helpful." "I know, but it's honest." Juliette took his hand. "Your mother hurt you badly. You have every right to maintain that boundary forever if you need to. But you also have the right to let her try to rebuild trust if part of you wants that. Either choice is valid." Min-jae was quiet, processing. Then, "I think I want to try. Eventually, but slowly." "Then that's what we'll do." They left the tea house and walked through Bukchon's traditional neighborhoods, past Hanok houses and narrow alleys that felt like stepping back in time. At one point, they stopped to watch children playing in a small courtyard, their laughter echoing off ancient walls. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" Min-jae asked. "Long term." "Sometimes. Why?" "Because I'm trying to figure out what my future looks like, and you're in every version I imagine." Juliette's chest tightened. "That's intense." "I know, but it's true." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not asking for promises or commitments you're not ready for. I just need you to know that this isn't temporary for me. You're not someone I'm dating until something better comes along. You're the person I'm building my life around. Even if we're still a disaster sometimes, especially then, because you're the disaster I choose every single day." She kissed him in that traditional courtyard while children played around them and Seoul hummed with afternoon life. It felt different than their first kiss on the terrace, less desperate, less urgent, but somehow more significant, like a promise being renewed instead of made for the first time. "I love you," she said against his mouth. "I love you too. Even when I'm difficult, especially then." They walked back through Seoul hand in hand, two people who'd survived the city's worst and were finally learning to thrive despite it. 1 year after the gala that changed everything, Juliette stood on the rooftop terrace of her new apartment building overlooking the Han River. The view was spectacular, Seoul sprawling in all directions, the river cutting through it like a silver ribbon, the mountains rising in the distance. Her consulting practice had grown to the point where she'd been able to afford this place in Yongsan, closer to Min-jae's penthouse but still independently hers. She'd learned that balance, independence and partnership existing simultaneously instead of contradicting each other. Her phone buzzed. Jinwoo texting. "Client meeting went amazing. They want to sign for 3 years. We're doing it, Juliette. We're actually building something." She smiled and texted back. Told you it would work. The collective had grown from 5 consultants to 15, with clients across Asia and Europe. They disrupted enough traditional consulting practices that Seoul's old guard firms were starting to imitate their model, not because they believed in it, but because they couldn't compete otherwise. It felt like vindication. Her door opened and Min Jae appeared carrying takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant, still wearing his suit from work, but with the tie loosened and the top button undone. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the food on her small balcony table. "You're getting good at this boyfriend thing. Only took a year and extensive therapy." They ate while watching the sun set over Seoul, turning the sky pink and orange and purple. Min Jae told her about his day, board meetings, strategic planning, the continued restructuring of his company into something that actually reflected his values instead of his father's. Juliette told him about the new client proposal she was developing, her concerns about scaling the collective too quickly, her satisfaction at finally feeling established in Seoul instead of constantly fighting for survival. "Speaking of established," Min Jae said carefully, "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Juliette's breath caught. "Min Jae, it's not what you think. Or maybe it is. I don't know anymore." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond set in platinum. "I bought this 6 months ago, kept trying to find the right moment to give it to you, and then I realized there is no perfect moment. There's just us, trying to build something real in a city that fought us the entire way." "Are you proposing?" "I'm asking if you'd consider spending your life with someone who's still learning how to be the partner you deserve. Someone who will mess up sometimes, but will always try to do better. Someone who loves you enough to risk everything, including rejection." Juliette stared at the ring, her heart hammering. A year ago, she would have been terrified of this moment. The commitment, the vulnerability, the risk of losing herself in someone else's life. But she'd spent 12 months learning that commitment didn't mean losing herself. It meant choosing someone to grow alongside. "Yes," she said. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Eventually, when we're both ready for it." She took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "But I need you to understand something first." "What?" "I'm not going to be a traditional wife. I'm not going to manage your household or prioritize your career over mine or become Mrs. Kang who exists in your shadow. I'm going to be Juliette Vale who happens to be married to Kang Min Jae. Those are 2 separate identities that coexist. I wouldn't want it any other way. And we're not telling your mother until we're actually ready to plan a wedding. This is ours. Private. Not something for family politics or social expectations." "Agreed. And I want a long engagement, at least another year, because we're still figuring out how to be together and I don't want to rush into marriage before we're ready." "Whatever timeline you need." Juliette looked at the ring on her finger, then at the man who'd given it to her, the one who'd destroyed his life for the chance to build something new with her. The one who was still learning, still growing, still trying every day to be better than he was. "Okay then," she said. "Let's do this." Min Jae pulled her into his arms and kissed her like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. Like she was oxygen and he'd finally learned to breathe. Like commitment wasn't a cage, but a choice they were making together. When they finally broke apart, the sky had gone dark and Seoul glowed beneath them like a city built on secrets that they'd finally learned to navigate. "I love you," Min Jae said. "I love you too. Even when you're impossible. Especially then." They stood on that rooftop overlooking the city that had nearly destroyed them both. 2 people who'd survived scandal and betrayal, and their own worst instincts to build something real. It wasn't perfect. Wasn't the fairy tale romance that movies made love look like. It was messy and complicated and required constant work and honest communication and the willingness to keep trying even when things got hard. But it was theirs, and that made it better than perfect. Seoul glittered beneath them, indifferent as always to the small human dramas playing out across its sprawling geography. Somewhere in the city, other people were falling in love, breaking apart, choosing each other despite impossible odds. The cycle would continue long after Juliette and Min Jae's story faded from public memory. But tonight, on this rooftop in Yongsan, none of that mattered. Tonight there was just a woman who'd come to Seoul to prove herself and ended up finding something more valuable than professional success. And a man who'd spent his life being controlled by others and finally found someone worth choosing freely. Together, They'd burned down everything that tried to contain them and built something better from the ashes. And as Seoul's lights stretched toward the horizon like promises made in neon and glass, Juliette realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for since the day she arrived in this impossible city. Not acceptance from people who'd never truly see her, not validation from systems designed to exclude her, not even the professional success she'd sacrificed so much to achieve. What she'd found was the courage to build a life on her own terms, beside someone who challenged her to become better while never asking her to become smaller. And in the end, that was worth every scandal, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. Because she hadn't just survived Seoul, she'd conquered it, not through domination or defeat of enemies, but through the quiet revolution of refusing to let anyone else define her worth. 3 years after the gala that changed everything, Juliette stood in that same grand ballroom for the Hanul Foundation's annual charity event. But this time, everything was different. She wore emerald green instead of midnight blue, her natural hair in an elaborate updo that had taken an hour to perfect. The engagement ring on her finger caught the light from crystal chandeliers she'd once found intimidating. And the man beside her, husband now, married 6 months ago in a small ceremony attended only by people who actually mattered, looked at her the same way he had that first night on the terrace. Like possession, still. But tempered now by respect, by trust, by the hard-won understanding that loving someone meant celebrating their autonomy rather than controlling it. "You ready for this?" Min-jae asked quietly. "Ready to face the same people who tried to destroy us 3 years ago?" Absolutely. Seoul's business elite watched them enter with expressions ranging from grudging respect to barely concealed discomfort. The scandal had faded from headlines, but not from memory. Everyone in this room knew exactly who they were and what they represented. A refusal to play by rules designed to exclude people like Juliette and punish people like Min-jae for choosing authenticity over obligation. Juliette didn't care what they thought anymore. Her consulting practice had expanded to 3 countries. She'd been featured in international business publications. She'd built something that existed entirely independent of Seoul's approval, and Min-jae had transformed his company into one of Asia's most progressive entertainment conglomerates, known for ethical practices and diverse hiring rather than the ruthless efficiency his father had championed. They'd both become exactly who they needed to be. Across the ballroom, Juliette spotted Jin Woo talking to a group of young entrepreneurs. He caught her eye and grinned, raising his champagne glass in mock salute. The collective had grown beyond anyone's expectations, disrupting traditional consulting so thoroughly that several major firms had simply copied their model. Near the windows, she saw David from her old firm, the one that had pushed her out during the scandal. He looked away quickly when their eyes met, and in a quiet corner barely visible among the crowd, Han So-yeon stood alone. She'd been released from custody 8 months ago after serving a reduced sentence for corporate espionage. Her family's empire was gone, their political connections severed, their social standing destroyed. So-yeon herself looked older, thinner, the elegant confidence replaced by something harder and more brittle. Juliette felt a complicated mix of emotions looking at her: anger for the harm she'd caused, pity for how completely she'd fallen, and a strange gratitude that her revenge plot had ultimately forced Juliette to become stronger. "Want to talk to her?" Min-jae asked, following her gaze. "I don't know, should we?" "Only if you want to." They crossed the ballroom together, people parting unconsciously to let them pass. So-yeon watched them approach with an expression Juliette couldn't quite read. "Juliette, Min-jae." So-yeon's voice was carefully neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." "We could say the same," Min-jae replied. "I'm here on behalf of a nonprofit I work with now, rehabilitating business practices for companies recovering from ethical scandals." Her smile was bitter. "Ironic, I know." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, 3 people whose lives had collided catastrophically 3 years ago. "I owe you an apology," So-yeon said finally, "for everything. The surveillance leak, the manipulation, the revenge campaign. She trailed off. "I was broken by losing Min-jae, and I tried to break you both in return. That was unforgivable." "Yes, it was," Juliette said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I've spent 3 years understanding how badly I fucked up, how I let bitterness consume me, how I became exactly the person I always judged others for being." Min-jae's expression was unreadable. "Are you happy now?" I'm getting there. Slowly. Therapy helps. Accountability helps. Building something meaningful instead of destructive helps. So-yeon looked at them both. And honestly, seeing you two together now, actually happy, actually healthy, helps too. Because I spent so long trying to prove you were toxic for each other when really, I was just bitter that you chose each other over everything else. We were toxic, Juliette said. We're still working on it every day, but we chose to do the work instead of letting the toxicity consume us. That takes courage I didn't have. So-yeon's voice was soft. I hope you're happy, both of you. You certainly earned it. She walked away before either of them could respond, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost from another life. Min-jae pulled Juliette closer. How do you feel? Sad for her. Grateful we didn't become her. Relieved that chapter is finally closed. Me too. They spent the rest of the evening circulating through the gala, talking to clients and colleagues and people who'd once dismissed them but now courted their attention. It should have felt like vindication, like proof they'd won whatever battle Seoul had forced them into. Instead, it just felt ordinary, because the real victory hadn't been changing Seoul's perception of them. It had been building lives they didn't need to escape from. Building a relationship that didn't consume them. Building careers that fulfilled them, instead of just proving something to people who didn't matter. Near midnight, they slipped out to the same terrace where everything had started 3 years ago. The view hadn't changed. Seoul still glittered beneath winter sky like a kingdom built on secrets. But they had changed. Fundamentally. Irreversibly. Do you ever regret it? Min-jae asked. Everything that happened. The scandal, the pain, the cost. Sometimes I regret how hard it was. But I don't regret where we ended up. Juliette leaned against the railing, looking out at the city that had fought her so viciously and somehow become home anyway. I came to Seoul to prove I could succeed anywhere. And I did. Just not in the way I expected. How's that? I proved I could survive anything, could rebuild from nothing, could refuse to let other people's limitations define my worth. That's success too. Maybe more valuable than the professional kind I was originally chasing. Min-jae wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I love you. I know. That's not the response I was looking for. I love you too. Obviously. She turned in his arms to face him. But I also love the life we built together. The fact that we're still here, still trying, still choosing each other every day despite knowing exactly how difficult we both are. We're not that difficult anymore. Yes, we are. We're just better at handling it. Min-jae laughed and kissed her, slow and deep and full of promises they'd learned to keep. When they broke apart, Seoul sparkled beneath them like evidence that impossible things happened every day in cities this big. Ready to go home? He asked. Whose home? Yours or mine? Does it matter? Not anymore. They left the terrace hand in hand, walking back through the ballroom one last time. The same room where they'd first kissed, where scandals had been born and reputations destroyed and lives irreversibly changed, but also where two people had found each other in the chaos, had chosen to keep fighting for something real despite every reason they shouldn't, had built a love that didn't consume them but elevated them. As they stepped into Seoul's winter night, Juliette looked back at the Hanul Foundation one last time. 3 years ago, she'd entered that building as someone trying to prove she belonged in spaces that would never fully accept her. Tonight, she left as someone who no longer needed acceptance from people incapable of seeing her worth. That was the real victory, not conquering Seoul, but refusing to let Seoul's limitations define her. And as they disappeared into the city's neon-lit streets, two people who'd survived the worst and built something better from the ruins, Juliette finally understood what her mother had been trying to tell her all along. Success wasn't about fitting into systems designed to exclude you. Success was about building something so authentic, so undeniably yours, that the systems became irrelevant. She'd come to Seoul searching for professional validation. Instead, she'd found something far more valuable. She'd found herself, and the person she wanted to build a life beside. Everything else was just details.